concerned about, hey, as we
Boy, that temperature's gonna drop like a rock tonight. 60 degrees to
whatever
upper 20s in the morning.
20s in the
Tomorrow morning, it's gonna be in the 20s.
your name is on
And the wind's blowing, it's like, oh, you know bad weather's coming, right?
Canadian, it's brutal.
But then it's gonna
Thank you.
rise again in the next
specifically.
Okay, it's coming up.
40, 50 after that, I'm good with that.
So I have to do a little more research on the specific language of the amendment, but my understanding, based on conversations I've had with Mrs. Wambaska, is, again, these are in the municipal court, those are ordinance violations.
Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order, please. Sorry. We can talk more about that.
Councilwoman Cleveland. Here. Councilman Saxonheimer.
Here,
Councilman Evans.
Present.
Councilwoman Smith. Absent. Councilman Hong.
Present.
Councilman Nelson. Present. Councilwoman Rosso.
Present.
Councilwoman Campbell. Okay, will you please turn your camera, please?
Miss Yolanda needs to turn her camera on.
Did we hear a verbal response from her?
Yes.
I did.
Okay, I heard her.
She needs to turn her camera on?
Well, she needs to have her camera on to be present at the meeting.
Do we have a quorum without, I mean, we should
Without.
have a quorum without her, okay.
I don't have my camera on if we were voting.
Well, if we needed you for a quorum, then you would have to have your camera on, but I believe we have a quorum with those present,
Yeah.
so
Okay, good.
it's not an issue.
Good.
So, first item on the agenda, discussion of the flock camera system. There were some questions that people submitted, and Captain Sanders is going to give another presentation, address the questions and concerns. And the way I've got that turned, can you stand on the elevated part? Sure. And that way Yolanda can hear and see you.
Okay, perfect. Well, apologies, I'm in my holiday body. I wasn't planning on standing up. Usually I'm behind a podium, so. Let me give you one of these, Mayor. I thought I'd give you one. I know that Yolanda had asked some questions from Chief Hall in reference to those tower-type cameras that you see on parking lots like Home Depot, Schnucks. She specifically saw one at the Schnucks. There are two major competitors that handle those type of cameras or that actually distribute and build them. One of those companies is the ProVigil, and you'll see they only sent me a flyer based upon an assessment that I did with them. The reason we didn't source a quote from them, and you can go to the ProVigil website, it's at the very bottom of the handout you received, and you can look at it yourself. They don't really deal with law enforcement. What they do is they deal with private entities and businesses, and these type of cameras are usually used at construction sites, privatized businesses, and places where people want live surveillance monitoring. Their company actually offers live surveillance monitoring where they will actually have representatives that watch the cameras 24/7. You pay licensing fees and subscription fees, and then when they see something, they actually watch the cameras real time. They contact law enforcement. They said that these cameras are actually not suited for high traffic areas because they couldn't have a person sit there and just watch a busy intersection for hours with the amount of traffic that would come through an intersection to try to spot crime. They're usually for places like, they specifically said like Home Depot, because they have a lot of inventory that's left outside overnight. So they watch the parking lots for people that come onto the parking lots for the sake of stealing and committing crime, and then they alert the police. So you'll see that when you go to their website, they don't have much resourcefulness as far as the law enforcement component. Their biggest competitor, and Councilwoman Campbell, I have a handout, Debbie's gonna bring it to you with the same information. I know that you couldn't be here with us, and I hope you feel better. But I wanted to do my due diligence and actually track down and answer your questions, because I know this has kind of been looming in the air for you for a while. The second is their biggest competitor is the Ecamm Secure, and you'll see that you actually have a soft quote from Ecamm Secure. So when I talked with the representatives there, what they offer is a little bit different. The Ecamm Secure actually works perfectly with law enforcement. What they do is they build, kind of like everyone knows we have the radar trailer, and we deploy the radar trailer when people have complaints for crime and things like that. Ecamm Secure will build us a camera with all of the things that we want. We can get a PTZ, pan tilt zoom camera installed on it. They'll install up to 4 cameras on it. The soft quote, as you can see, doesn't include the cost of 4 cameras. It's just a standardized camera that they're offering us in the soft quote that's attached. But we can add an LPR software to it for an additional price if we want to do LPR software. The benefits to this and what they said is they also offer a live monitoring subscription where and they do work with law enforcement, where if we had events like we had the Normandy Rendezvous at one point in time, or we have National Night Out, or like Redbird Rookies if they're having a game or something like that, or if we have dumping at Hosel Park, we could purchase one of these for the low price of $25,000. And we could deploy it into hotspot areas. The drawbacks for this are, even if we added the LPR software, all of the data that it's captured is not shared remotely. So we would actually have to go to the machine and download it from an e-card, bring it back to the police station, and then scour through hours of video to try to find the license plates at the times, because it's not automated like Flock. It's only internal, so we wouldn't be able to share that with other agencies, and other agencies wouldn't be able to tap into it to solve their crimes. And so it's kind of, you can use it. It has some positives, some pros, but it also has some severe drawbacks and cons for the price point. One of the good things is, they did say that they could integrate it into our current security system that we have, where we have the cameras in the building and we have those additional licenses. We would be purchasing the software, and the only thing that we would need to provide is the air card. So if we provide Wi-Fi to it, then it has the capability for us to deploy it. I think this is a special use tool we could definitely use to deploy in places like Hosel Park, or places where there's illegal dumping or just hotspot crime. I think it would be beneficial for us, but it doesn't necessarily meet the same objectives that we're trying to meet with the Flock camera system. There are some deficiencies with regards to what we're hoping to do with Flock. I know there were a lot of questions about whether or not this is a pet project, or if we're just looking for a new toy in the police department. And I wanted to speak to a couple of different situations. I know that there's a lady that's going to come to the council meeting on the first Tuesday. She was actually riding her bicycle on Florissant Road. I know Councilman Hong's biggest pet peeve is the speeding on Florissant Road, and he's trying to get the speed limit reduced there. This lady is a student of UMSL. She lives in Mansion Hills. She was struck by a vehicle at University Drive and Florissant Road by a vehicle that fled the scene after striking her. She has a compound crushing injury to her spine. She's a university student. We have no leads. Express Scripts from their cameras said that they saw a dark colored vehicle and they got more headlights than they did vehicle. If we had an LPR camera system there, we would have got the license plate of the car that hit that lady, and we would be able to solve her crime. It was really sad to stand at the station and talk to her and tell her that we have no leads and we don't anticipate having any leads, because how many cars travel up and down Florissant Road? We found a small marker from, I think it's like the driver's side mirror or passenger side mirror that struck her. So we have a piece of a vehicle in evidence, but trying to determine what type of vehicle it came from and find the vehicle, it's a needle in a haystack, and it's going to be near next to impossible. And one of the things she asked is, why don't you guys have cameras there? I said, well, maybe you should come to the city council meeting and speak to how this would benefit you personally, because if it solves one crime, it's beneficial. Now, I know there were some questions about what we could use the drug money for. I know everybody's like, ooh, more money. I invited a couple of my supervisors. We have Sergeant Wesley Gary sitting over there on the left, and Detective Sergeant John Beekman sitting there to my right. And I brought them here because I wanted them to just kind of speak to you guys a little bit with regards to some of the experiences that we have with regards to the crime we're experiencing in Normandy. I know you guys watch the news, and it's getting more dangerous, and the crimes are not getting easier to solve. Detective Sergeant Beekman is my expert when it comes to case clearance after the officers take the original report. So I'm going to have him speak to a little bit about some of the investigative tools that we have available to him, and how this would benefit him. And then Sergeant Gary, that's our drug guy. He's like Magneto. Guns and drugs just come to his hands wherever he is. And he's very, very, very good at what he does. He is my drug expert. So he gets all the drug money, brings it into the city, and he can speak to what those funds can be used for, how we get those funds, and what the penalties are for using those funds inappropriately, and kind of speak to why the Flock camera system kind of works, and we can use the drug money for the initial subscription. So I'm going to have Detective Sergeant Beekman. You want to go first?
Do you want me over there? Please, so that they can see you, so Yolanda can see you on the camera. Excuse me.
Good evening, all.
Good
I have a couple notable cases and a couple cases that happened here in the last month that have been pretty notable, that I believe that the flock camera system would have been extremely beneficial for us. In November, we got hit with a string of burglaries in 7200 block of Natural Bridge. That's one of the main focal points of entering into Normandy. That's one of the places I know we've discussed putting a camera, the vehicles that are coming in and going out of Normandy. That point, or that elbow that brings these vehicles in, not only would it help possibly capture vehicles coming in, it'll also capture people that are walking in the area, getting descriptions of people. We have limited cameras in the 7300 block of Natural Bridge that are based on the businesses. We had a homicide down there not too long ago as well in August. That camera would have been extremely helpful for getting the license plate, the vehicle description, kind of giving us a better idea than witness testimony and some of this grainy video that we do get in the area. One of the things that really happened down there was right in the last part of October with the shooting that we all pretty much aware of that happened at the Courtyard Bar and Grill. In that incident, we had at least 5 to 6 shooters that occurred that were shooting actively at each other. Our officers pulled up and were watching the gunfire. They watched the vehicle leave northbound on Florissant Road, passing by the trophy shop. They did not pursue that vehicle. I think they made the best call ever in not going into what I would call almost an active war zone and one of our officers getting hurt. We got very fortunate. One person got struck in the leg. That person very uncooperative with law enforcement in the investigation. We have no leads. We have no cooperating victims. I'm sorry, witnesses. But what we do have are business owners that are, when I went out there and did my area canvas, are pretty fed up with that establishment. If we had a camera system on Florissant Road right at the bridge where we were kind of previously discussing, as well as one at the entrance point at Natural Bridge and Lucas and Hunt, that would have given us a tool, a lead to kind of go on and try to find this vehicle and the people that are responsible. Maybe we can't hold them responsible for shooting another human being because no one wants to cooperate, but we have business owners that we can show that, hey, we're out here, we're doing our thing. We're trying to keep these people out of town doing this violent crime so that we can retain you in our community. I think that's pretty important. Captain Sanders brought up the leaving the scene where the young lady got struck by the vehicle. That's on the major thoroughfare. A couple other things that kind of popped up. Up on the north end of town off of Bermuda. I know we talked about Bermuda and Woodstock. Over the last year, that's been kind of another focal point. That's the gateway from Ferguson. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of residents that are creating the problems. I think we're getting a lot of bleed over from the Ferguson area, Berkeley, but we have people that they're victimizing. That corner has been a hotbed. We have a business there on the corner that we're also very familiar with. It would provide us a lot of advantages in getting intelligence information that we can't stick a police officer there 24/7 and watch. Yes, sir.
I had a question for you. This came up, there's a competitor for Flock that St. Louis City uses. Same technology, same camera system. Why Flock versus the competitor that St. Louis City uses?
I'm not familiar with the prior or the other competitor. One bit.
RTC, the Real-Time Crime Center.
Yeah.
The reason why we're not using RTC is because the majority of the county agencies, I provided you guys with the handout at the beginning when we did this the last workshop, the majority of the county agencies use Flock. So us using the Real-Time Crime Center isn't going to be beneficial or tantamount to help us solving things here in Normandy.
But when you say the majority of the criminals are going back to the city, or most of them from the city?
They're committing all the crimes in the
And
county.
going to the city.
They're committing all the crimes in the county, and so all the county agencies have Flock.
But what if they're going back down to the city?
It doesn't help us because we don't have that relationship with Metropolitan Police Department to work with them and access their system, and it wouldn't do us, like, for example, someone
That's
said,
not what I'm saying. Most of the people that's committing the crime, are they going back to the city?
No.
Are they coming to the county?
the city has actually come to the county now. Hazelwood is a hotbed for crime, Florissant's a hotbed for
But
crime.
once they commit the crime and leave.
No, what I'm
where
saying is
they
they
going?
live there. They live
They're
in
living
Florissant,
there.
they live in Hazelwood, they're county residents. So it's, what I mean by the city has come to the county is, historically, we could always say, well, I live in the county, it's not St. Louis. I don't know if you've realized the dynamic is switching, where the city is actually becoming just a little bit safer and the county is becoming more dangerous. They're outpricing the city and forcing those people into the county. We have detectives from Florissant, from Hazelwood, he just did a major case with, Major Foden.
From
Yeah,
Florissant.
from Florissant, and they were talking about the crime that these places are experiencing. The police chiefs are having a meeting of the NCI tomorrow for the mayors and all the police chiefs to talk about crime in the county and how county crime has exploded. The stuff that we're seeing from carjackings to people getting out in the Florissant Road thing that we had where the guy got killed was that last week or 2 weeks ago? We had a 20-year-old that was gunned down at the gas pump sitting in his car down there in Cool Valley. Thank God, guess what, how we solved it? Cameras, facial recognition software,
Yeah, but-
technology. So, and the residents, the people that killed him, they're not necessarily from the city. And so everyone's talking about how the crime is growing in the county. Flock is a force multiplier, and we're trying to team up with what most people have to get the most bang for the buck. The majority of the places, if this person, like Sergeant Geary made a point earlier, if Baldwin has 4 gentlemen that are armed with rifles riding around in a car, and if they have that information, we would only know that if we have Flock, if they're in Florissant, if they're in Hazelwood. We're not gonna know that because of
So what
RTC.
if they're in Cool Valley and Ferguson?
Cool Valley's looking at Flock, and so is everyone in this area.
Yeah, because, you know, you keep telling me about Chesterfield and places like that.
Oh,
If
I'm
the
just-
surrounding areas aren't participating, what's the use of getting the cameras?
They are. I gave you guys a list. Florissant's on there,
Okay.
Hazelwood's on there, Bridgeton is
Brentwood.
on there, Brentwood's on there. The guy that, the shooting
But we're
down
talking
there,
Cool Valley and Ferguson.
Cool Valley is actually looking at Flock right now, and so
What
it,
about Ferguson?
I'm not sure what, if Ferguson's using
Because, you
Flock.
know, if we can't look at the surrounding areas, the immediate surrounding areas, what's the use of the camera
Well,
system?
that's the problem.
Because
It's-
if they commit a crime in Normandy and they pass through Cool Valley and Ferguson, we'll pick them up, right?
Well, this is,
But if they don't go to Ferguson, if they don't go to Florissant or Chesterfield, they're gone.
well, no, this is, I think that we're kind of being kind of narrow
No,
sighted.
I'm just putting it out there, that's all
I
I'm
think-
doing, I'm just, scenarios, that's what I'm just putting scenarios
I
out
think the
there.
point is that Flock gives us the availability to glean information from hundreds of police agencies in the area, and we can access their Flock cameras through Flock, not just ours. So when a vehicle leaves from here, whether they leave here, we had a car stolen up north, they tried to steal someone's car in Dartmoor. The guy came outside, they popped off rounds at him. That gentleman, he ran back in the house, they went over a block over to Paddington, they stole the car. They then took that car and they drove through a gun shop in Fenton, Missouri. And the ATF came here and they wanted that police report because those guys then went on a string of crime in that exact car and broke into businesses all over St. Louis in the stolen car that was taken from here.
In an ideal world, and we utilize the information from the RIC down in the city, it's just an extra couple steps. You have to have that, we have a connection down there. We utilize her probably once, twice a week. It's one of those things where you're kind of wearing out your welcome after a while. The information that they have down there, it's immense. They have live camera feeds. They have, if you see tow trucks or repo cars, they have cameras on their cars. They utilize a lot of different sources. They've been very helpful. One of the cases that we utilized, Flock, we utilized the camera footage from, it's called, Watchtower, and we utilized the RIC down in the city because they have some programs that they can modify and kind of look and be able to read license plates. We had a young lady in Bell Ridge. She was a runaway. Long story short, continual problem. She's a 15-year-old girl. Well, the problem is when you're 15 and you run away with a gentleman that's in his 20s. You have a history of it. The last time that she ran away, she was located in an abandoned vacant house in the city on the south side by a guy by the name of Austin. And Austin called her mom and said, come pick your daughter up at this location off of South Grand. Very basic information. Mom truly believes, and I believe after doing the investigation, that this young lady was sex trafficked in that operation. Unfortunately, that's not an easy case to always prove. You have to have a victim that's willing to cooperate and kind of give you the information. In this case, we knew that we were looking for a white van with ladders on the top. Specifically, there was 4 on the right and 2 on the left. There was a dent on the passenger side of the van. So long story short, the van comes in, she jumps in, she takes off. We have a grainy photo. We utilized that grainy photo, had that, changed up till we could actually get a license plate. We took that license plate, we put it in Flock. That camera footage was so, precise, we had a very good picture of that van. We utilized that van's picture. That's when we contacted the rec down the city and said, hey, we have an idea that this guy's going to the city. Their camera system, their LPRs aren't as, they don't utilize Flock, so obviously it's like two different systems, so people gotta work with each other. But they utilize part of their database with the cars that drive around with the cameras on it, that they pay a subscription fee. And located at this van, sits at this house pretty much 4 to 5 nights a week. Now we have a location.
Wow.
Utilizing that information, we located a 4-family flat on the south side, which one was nice, the one that this young lady was in, no one should ever have lived in. Within less than 48 hours, we had that girl located in that apartment, back in the custody of her mom for medical attention. And I based that on a lot of, not just the Flock system. The Flock gave us a picture. When I went down there and found the van, there was no questions. I looked at that picture and went, yep, that's my van. It's a tool that I think that we can utilize to, a lot of these crimes, we don't have a lot of good victims. What I mean by that, somebody that's willing to cooperate. But you may be the victim of that violent crime, but in turn, your business was shot. Or you're the guy that lives next door and your house was shot, or you were shot in your house. But your neighbor, Sanborn incident from the other night, uncooperative. We have houses on both sides. Those rounds are gonna go through walls. A camera on each side of Bermuda, the north side of Bermuda. Boom, we got the vehicle, we got the plate. Now we have a lead. We put that vehicle out, we find it. We may not get the guy that was using it at that time. We may get it the next day, maybe a week later. But that gives us a lead, that gives us some evidence, that gives us some DNA. What's really cool about the system, like I said, I've never worked with any other system other than this, so I'm not gonna say I'm biased to it. It's the one thing I really know. But when you can put in a vehicle's basic description, a blue BMW 4-door, and in the last week, it'll pull you up. You can kind of show what cameras you want. It'll give you 500 images per se. You have to go through and look. We had an incident, Quick Trip. It was a felony stealing. It was a blue BMW, but it had a weird back bumper. I sat there and looked. I'm like, man, that's the car. That's the cool thing about this system, is that it isn't just watching live video feed. It gives you the clip. You can see it, you can pair it up and say, that's my car, that's my guy. I've used it in several cases. That's helped with clearances. And a wish list. You would want to have the Flock. You would want to have the LPRs. You would want to have the thing we can put here and we can put there. I think at that point you pretty much got every end covered. But with the price that this, from what I understand, is going to cost, and the use that we could use out of it for our investigations, I think we could clear up, at least have really good leads and know, hey, we may not be able to put somebody in prison on this, but we know we have a hot spot here now. Like that house on Sanborn, we had no idea. That 2 shootings in 2 nights, that's an immediate red flag. But they laid right underneath the radar. That would give us some leads. And what we're noticing now with these investigations, when I started 20 years ago, everything led to the city. This is a metro problem. Like we spend more time in Florissant on our follow-ups and our investigations. Florissant, unincorporated North County, Berkeley, and it's pockets of the same people, and they're kind of intertwined. And when you put it all on a board, I don't know what they're called, that graph is called with all the circles and stuff. But you're amazed at how it's kind of transitioned in certain areas. And so, unfortunately, like when I started here 5 years ago, we didn't have a lot of these problems. Matter of fact, a year and a half ago, we didn't. I did the count the other day, and our violent crime, and it's just not us. It's this.
Our homicides are up 500%.
We have 5 homicides this year.
We had 0 before, so if we have 5, we're up 500% on homicides. Sergeant Beaton, can you speak to when you got the notification from the Flock camera from Pasadena Hills that you called us?
So one of the things that you can do is you can set up the Flock system to where you'll get an email notification or a text message that indicates that the vehicle is triggered, whatever camera and what direction it's going. It gives you the plate and gives you the vehicle description. We still are able to piggyback off of Pasadena Hills, who was our contract city, obviously, and they still have the cameras, so we still have like a shared users agreement with them. So I still get notification. About a month ago, I'm sitting in the office and it was late at night, and my phone goes off and it says an email notification and stolen vehicle entered into Pasadena Hills. Well, Pass Park is right next door, and if they're gonna start hitting the cars, they're not worried about which city and what. So they moved from Pasadena Hills into Pasadena Park. The on-duty shift commander, I let him know, I said, hey, this car is in that area, it just triggered. Let's get them out. You know, I'm not saying let's go chase this car down and do what we do. Let's get them out of here. Hey, we're here. That could be a beneficial approach to some of this proactive policing. We can't be everywhere at every moment. But if we know that a car's coming down Bermuda, and I'm coming up north on Bermuda from 70, it's coming down from Woodstock, and I didn't pass it, I know it's probably back in here. Hey, let's get in here, let's flood this area, let's utilize our resources. And either A, get the car and culprits, or B, let's flush them out.
And that sergeant sat on Country Club and waited, and sure enough, the stolen vehicle came down Country Club. He said, I knew they were either gonna hit my car or they were gonna run. He said, so I waited for them to come down the cul-de-sac, and I was kind of sitting back there blacked out. And as soon as they pulled up, I flipped my lights on. He goes, and sure enough, they sped down Springdale, jumped on Bermuda, went on 70, and jumped on the highway. He goes, and I didn't chase it. I followed it to the highway until it got out of town. He said, but they were getting ready to start hitting the cars in Pasadena Park, and he was able just to scare them off.
So that effectively, Sergeant, you're talking about setting with a notification, like we're talking real time.
Yes.
You're able to set a perimeter even, or cordon off an area that you can use basic logic to
Yes.
say, hey, you know, we can anticipate them going this direction because that's what it was flagged going. They're going this direction, they're gonna come in here, we can cut them off.
And I've got a registered sex offender that just passed Bermuda and Woodstock. And we know we have several elementary schools down there. Probably, especially at dismissal time, probably just gonna head up that way and patrol around and just make sure he's not grabbing kids or doing weird
Orders
things.
of protections, anything that goes into the NCIC database, which is the national database, will get hit. So that order of protection, it gets hit almost every day.
Okay.
The same with the registered sex offenders. Then we can kind of, it's an investigative tool that I think would be extremely beneficial in a lot of our case clearances. Would give us
And if we get a missing kid, we can go back to Flock and we can look how many registered sex offenders came into the area during the time frame that the kid went missing too.
Okay, so I just like to ask one question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you were talking about the surrounding areas. I did understand what Councilman Evans was speaking about, but at this point, can you tell me which agencies at this point, other than Pasadena Hills, that has Flock currently?
I can print you out the list again. It was on the handout that I gave you
first
previously.
Okay, St. Anne?
Oh, there's plenty of people. I can go grab it real quick if you
Yeah,
like.
please.
Yep.
Please.
Off top of my head while she's retrieving them.
So in your opinion, where's the hot spots in Normandy? I know we got Natural Bridge and Luke's and Hunt, right?
Woodstock?
Yeah, Woodstock and Bermuda, it seems like that's a good focal point. When we did some of our hotspot policing and things like that, when we went out and looked, where are most of our problems at? That area, that intersection, it seems to be the most cars that we attempt to stop, but Woodstock has been a cut through. It'll take you right into Berkeley. You're not on the beaten path, you're not on South Forest Road. So it's one of the cut through streets. The area that's east of Bermuda and Ferguson, we have a lot of people that we are very familiar with that are going down there. A lot of juveniles. That's really what our problem is the juvenile issue.
But Detective, you said that there were cars being abandoned, the stolen cars that are dropped off in
Yes.
that area.
We have, and it goes both ways. Augusta was hit. They stole a car out of the city. They abandoned it right there at Florissant and Augusta, and they went down to Augusta and stole a vehicle, and then that was recovered back in the city. So it's kind of like is it a game? It's absolutely, you know.
There's still people right.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, there's somewhere there. I mean, steal a car, go home and drop it, and steal another, go where.
The big thing I'm getting out of this, though, if I may, is because I was sort of on the fence before tonight. I was very much on the fence the first night this was introduced to us. But the most glaring detail about something like Flock, for instance, is that we're able to get something from what we would normally have nothing from.
That's the best,
Like,
yes.
we don't have anything to go off of most of the time. But you all don't have anything to go off of
And that's-
most of the time.
And
And that's-
7 out of 10 incidences that occur in any city occur with utilizing a vehicle. So, I mean, that's just statistical data. So 70% of the time, there's going to be a car involved. And, you know, a white car or a black van isn't really beneficial to us as much as, you know what, a white car, at this time, we put it in Flock, well, now we've got a license plate.
Right. And then also, to add on to that though, like, if we think about our search engines, like Google, for instance, being, you know, the most well-known, you had other search engines throughout the decades, you know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you had other search engines, but you had to specify what you were looking for exactly the way it was supposed to be spelled, even if it was misspelled, for instance.
But
In this instance, you're able to have criteria, search criteria for details that you normally wouldn't be able to search for in other systems. Other systems don't give you that accessibility.
That specific.
Yeah.
And I think it's, I don't know if it's algorithms or whatever does this, but
Right.
the fact that you can look for a BMW and, you know, you're that specific, instead of, you know, a broad four-door white passenger car, you're talking, it shrinks it down, and those
Drastic.
manpower
Right.
hours go to other things, and, you know, once you get the leads start moving and shaking, and you start seeing the progress in the case developing, you know, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of people don't see things. I love the Ring cameras on the doors, but depends on how you set up your field. You
What
may
it
not get
captures.
anything. So we see a lot of that where we'll see 4 cameras and we won't get anything. We're like, man, we got 4 cameras, we're good to go, and we're 0 for 4. And I'm like, that's not good batting average.
Yeah, I had to get another one. Cause that Ring doorbell is anything past 30 feet.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. So to be clear, this is paid for out of drug seizure money.
Correct.
Right.
Year 1. So we get to watch it, see how it works. Excuse me. So in a year, you come back and say, this is great, or this isn't what we expected it to be.
We'll be able to bring you some definitive results, because anytime someone generates a police report, if they use the Flock camera system to make an ID, or for any investigative lead that turns out, they have to document how they came to the information. So you'll see, if we could go in we could go in CARE right now and type, like if I put in search words, I could type Facebook, and every time someone put Facebook.
Well, you'll be able to use that information to report
To
to
give you
us and say,
details
hey,
and
look, this
statistics.
looks like it's really been worth
It
it, or
works.
it wasn't
Or it
what we
doesn't
hoped it
work.
would be. In either case, if you come back and say, this is really something, we love it, then you're gonna ask us to put this in part of your regular police budget at that
Correct,
point?
yes.
You couldn't squeeze year 2 out of the same,
No, we can't, so.
okay, that answers my question.
No.
We can,
Well,
Yeah.
I have a question. Now, you mentioned that you can call up all blue BMWs. I thought it just captured license plates, so you can put them out like a white Cadillac or something, and it show you all white Cadillacs and, okay.
Pretty cool.
See,
That is pretty cool.
yeah.
see, I wasn't aware of that.
That's
You can even search bumper stickers, like if
Yeah,
there's
I
a
wasn't
rainbow
aware.
bumper sticker, you can type rainbow bumper sticker.
very,
Well, I thought that, at first, I thought the great work by our police department to get that seizure money to have this program. And I thought it was a great idea, so I mean, they're paying for it the first year round, and I don't think it'd be anything but something good
Okay.
for
How
our
much
city.
will it cost for the second years and then after?
I don't have
Wasn't it,
those.
$7,500?
The cameras are $2,500 a year,
Yeah.
and we were looking to put 3 to 4 cameras up, so $7,500 to $10,000 is the maintenance,
Right.
or the yearly subscription that we would engage in a contract with Flock for, and we can do a year-to-year basis. they will let us bill or budget year to year.
Yeah, so after the year of drug money, if we find out, this camera at this location, the third camera isn't working, then we can
Why
adjust.
can you only use the drug money for the first year?
I'm gonna let Sergeant Gary speak to that because he hasn't had a chance to come up. Does anybody have any more questions for Detective Sergeant Beekman?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just a quick question while we're waiting. Does this kind of then flip the script for us? Because, back in the day, it used to be wisdom that told you, hey, don't have a ton of identifying information about your family, your kids on your car, because that kind of gives people leads as to where you live, what you do for a hobby and your interests, and let's narrow it down. But if you're able to have a specific bumper sticker that helps identify your vehicle much more easily, aside from just a license plate, would this then make it more beneficial to have identifying markers or
I think that
stickers?
if you have things that aid the police, well, number one, I don't think we care what color a criminal is. I think we just care that they're committing crime and we want them to, be apprehended. But I think that, the easier they make it for us, criminals aren't necessarily smart, the better it's going to be for us. I know I have an Oak Brook Elementary bumper sticker on the back of my car.
Right.
And it's because you're supposed to spot them in public and flip them upside down so you've been equaled. So, we have a little game that my kid's school plays. If I go and I commit a crime and they get the Oak Brook Eagle bumper sticker on the back of my car, the little magnet on the back of my car, and they catch it, then guess what? It's easier to catch me. And
If your
guess
car
where-
gets
guess-
stolen.
That part. And guess where they could always come look for me at? Oak Brook Elementary School.
Yeah.
So, it's definitely a crime solutions tool. And I know that Sergeant Gary is my drug specialist, and he's a road supervisor. He's out here, he's going to the shootings, he's going to the calls. He's the boots on the ground. He's right now working, your days or nights?
Working nights tonight, filling in for a vacation for someone.
So he's rotating every 60 days and nights, and he's kind of seeing a vast gamut of the type of crimes that we're having. So I always like to go to the boots on the ground people. This is not only for drug questions, but he's a road supervisor. He's actually responding to the calls, so.
There's other systems out there as we've discussed, but it's kind of, my analogy is a little different. Like you're a search engine, that's a good analogy, Google. It's kind of like Ford versus Chevy back in the day. Chevy more popular than go with Chevy because more people have it. If you have problems, they can contact other agencies. Hey, my camera's doing this. How do we solve it? Oh, we did that last week. Do this, so it's easier to find solutions if there's more people on the same system. You can share the information. I know through what's called MOCIC, Mid-State Organized Crime Information Center, that we're a member of, I had applied for a poll camera. So to do that, it's mainly used for organized crime, drug investigations, but we had a lot of stolen cars getting dumped in the 7200 block of Woodstock at an apartment complex. So I deferred that camera from a drug investigation to putting it at these apartment complexes, set it up on a pole, monitored stolen cars getting dumped. We had nights where they stole a car in the 5900 block of Bermuda from an apartment complex, went to Woodstock, pulled in there, another car pulled on the Ted Jones parking lot. They emptied the car out, threw all the stuff on the parking lot and in the trash can. We seen that later, but they went there, cleaned the cars out. They're like shooting a video. They leave, come back later in the night. They dumped 2 different cars there. So we recovered stolen cars there. One incident that we had was with Bridgeton Police Department. We seen them broad daylight pulling a red Dodge 3/4 ton pickup, back it up right under the camera. And it couldn't have been planned better. And we saw the guy in a black Impala parked next to it, get out. They went through the truck right under the camera, going through, taking the stereo out, taking tools, got in the black Impala and left. We got a hold of Bridgeton. Bridgeton linked with Florissant's flock system, caught the black Impala clear as day, got the license plate on it, which was a dealer tag, that they were swapping between 2 other cars, a black Durango and a red Challenger. So that camera system picked up that plate throughout Florissant at Newhalls Ferry, Lindbergh, like on a regular basis. They were able to kind of hone in to where to search for that car, the 3 cars. But it seemed as if A lot of times we joke, we only catch the dumb ones. But it's a learning curve. If we can get the equipment like this, put us up a step, at least for a short time, we may be ahead of them. I mean, it's gonna be constantly growing. Technology advances, they get smarter, they get hip. After that red Dodge pickup and Bridgeton's investigation, they found out about our pole cam. But since then, we haven't had a single stolen car dumped there. So it curbed crime. May have just pushed it to a different city, but at least they got a benefit of us having a pole cam. And the pole cam was a great idea, but we only get it for 30 days. We have to submit paperwork requesting it, we put on a wait list, we get it for 30 days, we have to return it, and we don't know how many months it's gonna be before we get another camera. And that's a standalone system to where we have access. I had to burn copies to give to Bridgeton of the video, where Flock, they went straight to Floris's cameras and they honed in on where the suspects were.
So what I'm hearing then is there's other systems available, we've got prices on them, but this is the system that everybody's in agreement. This is the system you want.
It seems like it's more widely used, which is more beneficial if Florissant can log into our cameras and see a car and give us a heads up, or we can log into theirs and be like, hey, we got a stolen car here, we picked it up on a camera in Florissant, what do you know about this area? And it just helps out a lot, whether we make a case or they make a case. I think we're doing it as like a community and law
Okay.
enforcement.
Does anybody have any more questions or concerns
drug money.
regarding this?
Can you
Oh,
What can,
yeah.
what can it be used for?
So the drug money is intended for, we get it from drug seizures, which we have to prosecute the case federally. Agreement with the US government is that they return 80% of drug seizures if we originate. So like if I made a traffic stop and I seize money, the government takes 20% off the top for processing and, you know, to aid them in their future endeavors. But we get 80% back. So it's used for training and for equipment for the police department. It's supplemental income, it's not replacement income. It's meant to buy us equipment that we normally couldn't get. So like if we wanted to get a tacked out vehicle or bulletproof vest that an agency didn't have, that's what it's used for, is to buy equipment that we normally wouldn't be budgeted for. The training is to help us in drug investigations for expenses. So like if somebody wanted to go to Chicago for a drug narcotics investigation training, that would come out of the drug seizure funds, not of the department or the city's funds.
Yeah, and I'll add to that because I've also brushed up on some of the regulations. Because it's the federal government involved, there's a bunch of rules about what you can spend the money on and how you can spend it. And the key thing that we don't want to do is get involved in supplantation of the police department's budget, meaning this is a general use line item like just a police officer's salary or just a regular old patrol car or
computers.
handcuffs or something really basic that we should just be paying for. We cannot use the drug money to supplant that from the budget and basically just throw that drug money into the general fund is essentially what that would be doing. If we, in going back to Councilwoman Campbell's original question, if we start doing this as a multi-year thing, I think there would be an argument that this would be supplantation, because now this becomes something that the police department regularly uses. Right now, it's novel, it's something new, we're trying it out. It's something that I think fits well within the drug seizure money, but if we start going from a year-to-year basis, not only is the drug money that comes in, it's not consistent, it depends on, and if you don't get a drug seizure then that year, you shut the flock cameras down. But I also think you would get into the realm of supplantation, and the penalty for supplantation is you get kicked out of the program. And
It's a little bit more.
Yeah, there's actually, you can be federally audited, it's governed by a United States code, criminal code, to where you could face criminal charges through the federal system.
it is a little bit.
I don't want
Let's avoid that.
Yeah.
That's my official legal opinion. Let's avoid that.
So the 1 year is a government standard?
I don't think there's a standard in necessarily. I just think it would be getting into the realm where it'd be harder to argue that this is a novel thing that is aiding the police department. It would become a year in and year in year in and year out contract, it's gonna be harder to argue that they just wanna spend the police, or they're just using the
But the
drug money
regulations
for
don't
this
give
investment.
But the regulations don't give a specific timeline as to what is an,
No, not necessarily,
What does
but
she mean by,
and also, I
is she
mean,
talking about to spend the money or what we can spend it on?
no, I'm saying that like, if we spent it, if we buy the cameras for 1 year and then, he said that it's like not a novice, but what,
well, in
yeah.
general,
So
the
then
guidelines.
if we use the money use it for 2 years, because let's say we're not quite sure, the government would say, no, you can't use it for 2 years, is what I'm saying. Like
Right, I don't know
It's
that
a
that would
one-time
happen.
purchase kind of thing. The way they roll it out there is if we use it to buy, like say for instance, we use it to buy, like Sergeant Gary was saying, we only give out level 2 ballistic vests, which don't stop rifle fire.
No, I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is with these rules and regulations, is there a specific timeline for their saying, like, you can only buy one new thing, buy this one thing 1 year, but then if you use it for 2 years, now you have to change it to your general budget. That's what I'm saying.
I don't think so. So it's kind of an interesting situation because Flock is a subscription-based service and the guidelines aren't narrowly tailored to subscription-based services. I just think that, 2 years would be okay, 3 years maybe, but if we're 10 years down the line and we're still using the drug money, one, there's still the question of drug money isn't a consistent source of revenue. And two, I just think it looks bad and it has an air of supplantation if it goes on too long. And also, I think it's something that we should just look to have in our general fund if we can afford it. We've just got through budgeting season, but we can do this now if we use drug money, so.
I recall 1 year, we had a good drug bust on Highway 70. And we did, I think you recall too, Chief, we were able to upgrade our police department back with seizure money. And with the computers and different stuff, we did rehab situation. Can you elaborate on that?
So when Major Madigan renovated the police department, again, it's a one-time use where the police department had not been upgraded for a long time. There were deficiencies with just the facility for accreditation purposes. The accreditation requires that our facility be kept to certain standards and things like that. So they did use some line items from the drug seizure money to cover those expenses. And the reason why we've sat on this drug seizure money for so long is because it's really, really hard to spend the money and not get audited by the federal government.
It must be pertaining to police activity.
And it has to have a drug element or drug component. So, I mean, we really kind of stretched the boundary. Like, you remember when ARPA came out and everyone was like, what can we use it for before they relaxed the guidelines? How confusing and how scary that was about using it for the wrong things. That's what the drug seizure money is like, except for they haven't loosened the restrictions. They're still real tight. So whenever we want to do something, if there's any question about whether we could do it, we'll always just have Sergeant Gary reach out and just inquire. And they're going to either tell us, yes, that fits the bill, or no, don't do that.
So what you're saying,
I do want to move the conversation along. If everybody's questions are answered, and they don't have any more questions about what the system is and how it's going to be used, I want to make sure questions are answered. But that be, if they are, let's move on to the next item on the budget.
yeah.
All right? Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sergeant.
Good job.
Thank you.
So at the next meeting, there'll be the resolution presented again? Is that?
Yes.
Discussion of business license.
The business license ordinance is what it should have read. That's my fault. The discussion of the business license ordinance. And at our last meeting, I think I only heard one objection, and it was that there was no, like any law, there has to be an enforcement mechanism. We've got an ordinance that says that you have to do this. Well, what if you don't? Okay, and that's the point that Yolanda was making. I don't want to speak for you, Yolanda, but if I hear right, if you fail to follow the guidelines of this ordinance, what happens?
Well, there was that, and there were some other things that I had asked that I didn't get to ask, but there were some other things that I asked
Okay.
Raymond about.
And the one you
that he
passed
would take
out, the
back.
Breckenridge Hills one that you passed out, did have a penalty provision that our ordinance doesn't have, but we could certainly add to. But what I want to hear is what does everybody think? First of all, what is a fair penalty for operating without a business license? For ignoring the ordinance, just kind of flipping your finger at the city and willy-nilly opening your business? What is a fair penalty for that?
You want
Floor's open.
$10,000. You asked, hey, I mean, because if you go 2 or 3 years, because I think if you go 2 or 3 years, you know that you're doing something that's not right. So hit them with a stiff penalty. What's our penalty now? $100?
25% of the,
Business license?
25% of the fee.
So what does that come out to?
Well, as the minimum fee is $50, it's like $64.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm
But-
over exaggerating 10,000, but. I
Right.
think
It should be
at
significant
least-
is what you're saying.
At least $1,000.
I agree.
How do you
Minimum.
track the back taxes as well? The tax.
Or we can do this $1,000 every year. Every year that you don't comply, that's $1,000.
And
Or every day that you don't comply, break it down to a day,
Yeah.
take that 1,000 divided by 525. Or an initial, go ahead, Sam.
well, and I think there could be some,
Then you're
off the
making
top of my
fair
head,
attention.
there may be some statutory limits on what you can do for a late fee, and that's something we can look into before the next meeting. But kind of what I'm hearing is, as much as we're allowed to take, or as much as is reasonable for the penalty, is what we should do.
The legislature that I gave Andy, he was saying that there was there was some question about whether or not you could penalize an organization up to a certain point. Is that right? But I really didn't.
So, did you send that to me via email or did you hand that to me in person?
No, I handed it to you at the last meeting, but we were.
Trying to recall. May I see that?
What was the Breckenridge Hills?
Thank you.
Yolanda had found it.
Just need to refresh my memory.
Top paragraph on the second page is where the penalty phase, I think that's where the penalty paragraph was.
Here it is. So, I'll try to give the short answer, but I think I need to give the long answer to kind of maybe set the scene for the rest of this discussion for penalties. And so what I was saying to Yolanda and Debbie when they were talking to me about this is, I don't see any problem with, let me just read this real quick. Right, so this penalty provision is perfectly fine, right? But it only really addresses one issue, which is someone who is operating a business without a license. And so there are kind of 3 issues at play. What do we do about someone who is operating a business without a business license? What do we do when someone is operating a business when someone has a business license and they are operating their business in a way that is in violation of some other portion of the code? And what do we do when someone who has previously been in violation of the code, for example, operating a business without a business license, when they come and they finally apply for the business license, right? So there's kind of three connected but distinct issues that we're dealing with. So, as far as a penalty goes, for someone who is operating a business and they have not secured a business license, Breckenridge Hills has a $500 penalty. That is probably pretty standard, I would guess. There's also a, well, specifically, it's a, be punished by a fine not to exceed $500 or by imprisonment for a period not to exceed 90 days. Many municipalities, including Normandy, have a general penalty ordinance in their the general ordinance section of their code, but which basically applies wherever there is not some other penalty provision that applies. And I believe in Normandy, it is $1,000 or 90 days imprisonment. Is it?
It is.
It is, yeah. Which is pretty standard.
Not both?
No, it can be both.
It's
It can
up
be
to the judge.
both. I don't think I've ever seen someone imprisoned for
Well, that's, on my copy, what was passed out, I scratched it out and put a star by it, because is any judge really gonna send somebody to jail for 90 days? But it,
But so,
go ahead.
An additional question, so that is perfectly reasonable. I don't think we could get away with $10,000, I'm sorry, Tony. But there is an additional question which I believe I brought up with Yolanda when we were discussing this, is that there is an additional statute which limits the imposition of fines for certain municipal ordinance violations. And I would need to do some research to determine whether or not this type of ordinance violation would fall under that limit. So for example, for minor traffic violations, there is a fine limitation of $225, including court costs, for any minor traffic violation, which is, non-moving violations, anything that only assesses like 2 points, There is also a statute which imposes limits for municipal ordinance violations, and I know for a fact that this applies to housing code violations, building code violations, and I don't remember the exact schedule of fees off the top of my head, but it's something like $200 for the first offense in 12 months, $275 for the second, $350 for the third, and $425 for the fourth and continuing violations in a given 12-month period. So the point is that if, upon further research, operating a business without a business license was a violation that falls under that statutory limitation, we might be limited to the fees that I just set forth, or whatever they might be in the statute. But if not, then we could certainly impose 500 up to 1,000, I think, would be.
That speaks to the part B where it says each and every day of operation of a business is without a required license.
As a separate violation, is that what it says? I don't have it in front of me.
Yes, and that actually already, and it does. It says each and every day of operation of a business without the required license of each and every day of operation under a fraudulently obtained license shall be considered a separate offense. And that's pretty standard for example, for housing code violations. If someone's house is not up to the property maintenance code, every single day is a separate
So I've got a
violation.
question. Is this assessed by the city, or is a ordinance violation ticket given, and then this is assessed by a judge?
So let's say someone was operating a business without a license in the city of Normandy. Either the police department or the code enforcement agency, the code enforcement officer would issue a citation.
Okay.
That citation would be, they'd be issued a summons to appear in municipal court. And then just like any other municipal court ticket, the vast majority of which are traffic tickets, but we are getting more and more code enforcement tickets, they come talk to me. We either figure out some alternative resolution, or we have a trial, or they just plead guilty. But ultimately, that is a ticket like any other in municipal court, and the judge does ultimately assess the fine. Judge Delley.
In addition to a fine, can the penalty also include a cease operations for 30 days or something like that? Would we have the authority, if they're operating without a business license, to just shut them down?
So, maybe. Now, can Judge Dully issue an order that telling someone to cease operations it gets a little complicated, right? So this, under this kind of penalty provision, I would say no.
Okay.
Right? There could be an additional provision, much like, for example, in the nuisance code, where there is a separate hearing in front of, for example, the council, and then if there's a finding that.
Well, yeah, that gets covered. I was just
It gets
thinking
more
about,
complicated.
is there a way the
Now-
police could say, you're operating without a license, you're not authorized to do
Now,
this?
something that I could do, for example, is,
shouldn't be
let's,
doing that.
let's say someone's operating without a business license, and they come in and we come to a deal where they get placed on what's called a suspended imposition of sentence probation, or an SIS. What that means is if they complete a 12-month probation period, and 12-month is the statutory limit on that, for municipal ordinance violations, then at the end of that 12-month period, this would not go on their record. And for whatever reason, they may want to avoid having a business license violation on their record, right? For example, if they wanted to apply for a business license.
So they pay the fee and then are put on probation.
Well, so with the SIS probation, there is, what it means is, in the criminal phase, there is the finding of guilt, and then there is the sentencing. And so in this case, they would be pleading guilty. They said, yep, I did it. I was operating without a business license, but then no sentence, i.e. the fine, would be imposed. They would pay court costs, but they wouldn't pay the fine. They'd be placed on probation, and a condition of that probation could be you do not operate without a business license anymore in the city of Normandy. And then if they did operate without a business license, we could revoke their probation, hit them with the original fine. We wouldn't have to have a trial because they've already pled guilty to it, and we could charge them with an additional citation. Frankly, I think that's getting a little complicated for this, when we could just hit them with a ticket every single day until they close up shop.
Yep. So,
Is it possible to, oh,
no, go ahead.
is it possible to, like Mark was saying, have an immediate shutdown under the premise of health and safety? Because if the building is not, what do you call it? It's not,
Not inspected for code compliance.
inspected, yeah.
Oh, until it, yeah.
I'd have to look more closely at the code. I mean, it really just depends on whether what they're doing operates as a nuisance. But again, to be clear, if someone's operating a business that they do not have a license to operate, when a police officer appears at their doorstep and says, you're operating without a business license, here's a ticket, they have to shut down right then and there, right? Because it's not that they get to keep operating and they just get tickets. No, they have to shut down. And they'll keep getting tickets as long as they do that.
So you could do it just by saying, you can't shut them down, but you could say, if you're here tomorrow, you're getting another ticket. And if you're here the next day, you're getting another ticket.
Right.
You're effectively shutting them down.
Right, now I guess the question is, let's say, I don't know, someone's operating an illegal liquor store, right? And they sell a bottle of whiskey, then they get a ticket. If they then, right within the next 2 minutes, sell another 6-pack of beer, do we hit them with another ticket, effectively shutting them down that way? Or do they just get free reign until the next day? The way this particular ordinance reads, I would say that by day is the violation, not necessarily by transaction. But I can do a little.
Okay, so I
research
just
on
want
it,
to kind of canvass the council. Tony made his position clear. How punitive do we want to be in these situations? Just as strict as we can be, hammer them hard? I want to hear from everybody, so we know, give some guidance to Andy as to how to put this ordinance together.
I would like to see them fined per month, say $100 a month, not to exceed $1,000, per year.
Go ahead, all right,
mean-
let's everybody chime in.
That way it's just easier for the administration to enforce. If they did it 2 months, it's a $200.
All right.
Yeah.
It's pennies in the pocket, though, I mean.
Well, I think
I'm just throwing that out there.
He just putting out a number.
I just threw a number out. I mean, it could be anything per month that you want, but I think it should be done per month. Because if it's a violation every day, you could ticket them every day, and I think what I gathered, you could fine them every day as per those tickets, unless they come to some agreement.
I think the easiest thing would just to be add a general penalty violation section to the ordinance saying, if you're operating a business without a business license, you're subject to the general penalty under Chapter 100 of Normandy City Code.
Right.
And then that means every day that they have a violation, we can write them a ticket. Now, originally, the 5% thing that we kind of started with, that's the fee for applying for a license late. It's not necessarily there's a fee and then there's the penalty, right? Which the penalty goes through a ticket and the court process. The fee is just, if you want your license renewed, then you need to pay the late fee because it's February and you were supposed to pay January 31st.
So in the ordinance, you could have a definition of operating without a license, which means rather than being 2 weeks late in your application, yearly application, which anybody can do, maybe 90 days operating without a license that's the definition of operating without a license. If you go 90 days without that license, so that somebody that just happens to forget to apply, they wouldn't be subject to really punitive
Right, yeah, and
damages.
that's something that I guess we kind of need to tackle because a vast majority of the late fees we come across are people who did, the letter didn't reach them, it got lost in the mail, they forgot, they're a small business, and they didn't make it up here before January 31st and pay their fee. And that's where the 25% fee comes in. And I guess that is a policy decision on how we want to construct this ordinance to deal with the late fee cases. If they have not renewed their license after a period of time, then do we consider them operating without a license? Or how long is the grace period?
I think so, but
before we start ticketing.
Is that 90 days? Is it 120 days? At some point, you're operating without a license. Now, there's been businesses that have operated for a year or years. Go ahead, Debbie.
Well, I'm just saying, if they're saying that it was lost in the mail, why don't we send it in the mail where they have to sign it? And then we get that receipt.
It's their responsibility to renew their license. If the letter doesn't make it to them, it's on them legally. But it happens. They're small businesses. Not everyone has their stuff together, just to be frank about it. And do we want to shut them down on February 1st, or do we want to have a grace period and just charge them the late
Right, and it could
penalty?
be a progressive, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. But we need a definition of operating without a business license that doesn't include people that just happen to forget to apply.
Or do we want to send an officer out on February 1st? Which we could, and give out a bunch of tickets, but.
Do you have some input on
I have a
that?
question,
Yeah,
actually.
that's a little bit.
Sure.
What percentage of our businesses own the buildings that they're inhabiting? Because
We're on the same.
is there any penalty for the people that, it's like a residence? We have lots of squatters in town, but shouldn't the people that own the houses, they know what the rules are, they don't send the people?
Yeah, but they can't control how a business operates.
So I was just going to follow up on the question about what we can do to more effectively shut these places down immediately. So section 220035 places used for the commission of crimes or ordinance violations, right? So if to what Captain Sanders is saying, if someone is illegally operating a business in violation of the code of ordinances, right, and that's all that has to be shown, inside of a building that they rent, that is owned by someone else, the city could send a letter saying there's currently a business being operated in violation of the code of ordinances.
To the owner.
To the owner. If it
There you
happens
go.
again, your
There you go.
occupancy will be revoked for 6 months.
Right, I want to add to that. I think that's what our current problems are, the oversight. Now, we should know every business in our city that's operating. We should know that. I was really piggybacking off of Yolanda Campbell when she was stating that there were businesses operating on a handshake. I've been here for 7 years operating, and I was thinking, I wanted to know about that. they've been here operating for several years, no oversight, and where is the oversight? I mean, just like you were saying earlier on, Sam, not pointing fingers at you, but you said that any business at this point that gets signed or in, it's got to come through, not the board, to the city administrator, of course.
For a new business license,
New
yeah.
business license. Now, our oversight, we should know every business operating in our city. We should know if it's, if they renewed their license or whatever. And just like you were saying, if we need an officer to knock on their door and say, hey, you need to see City Hall. You need to come to City
Yeah.
Hall. Somebody needs to see you.
And we do have, I just want to clarify, we do have that. We have a register
It's in it.
of business licenses. We have an entire filing cabinet
What the
that
s-
years past. And
What the city can't necessarily help though, is there was a barber shop that opened up on Florissant Road. The gentleman that was in the barber shop had been there for 20 years. He died. His nephew just moved in there. He has no barber's license. He was there for 3 or 4 years and was just cutting hair. And we received a tip from the state saying, hey, there's a guy cutting hair and someone had a bad experience.
You talking about
He doesn't-
Florissant?
Uh-huh, by the old trophy shop, right there on, where the car wash used to be.
Exactly.
And we went by there, and sure enough, there was a guy in there. He's like, oh, my uncle just left me the business. And I was like, no, that's not how that works. And we shut them down, and we posted a notice.
Getting back to
And
Andy's,
there was no hot water in there.
getting back to Andy's point,
Yeah.
going after the property owner, so what remedy would the property owner have? Just evicting that person then? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
the property owner can't
presumably-
force somebody to get a business license. They've
Right, but
got a lease,
presumably it's in violation of their lease, there's some sort of language in most leases about not,
And like to add
violating
that the
ordinances, and they
property
can go
owner's
to them and
getting,
say, hey,
he's
you
getting
get
rent,
out.
he's getting paid. He's going to get his money every month.
Oh, I know, but
city
I just
said-
wanna make sure that the property owner can evict this person.
I mean, it really depends on the specifics of their lease.
Right.
But that's kind of for them to figure out maybe,
Right.
I don't necessarily think the city should be hamstrung by that.
I think we
Okay.
should be more strict on property owners.
And this is,
Yeah.
I mean, this is effective. The city sent a letter to the property owner of a certain bar and grill. And the property owner, I believe, contacted the city the next,
He was
like
there.
immediately.
Yeah.
And
That's what
was
I'm talking
very,
about.
very,
Concerned.
very much wanting to cooperate with the city. So it's effective, right? Because it affects their ability to rent that property out for 6 months to anybody.
All right,
Would this, if I may, would this then also apply to residential situations? Because if you think about it, if you are a homeowner and you're renting out your home to people, but you're not paying taxes, you're not registered as a business, is that then applicable as a?
I would suggest not, because it's so difficult to evict somebody. I mean, there's homeowner rights, it's incredibly difficult to evict.
hold on, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Yeah,
So you're talking about, so there's a few different things. I mean, there's
A slumlord.
home occupations. If you're talking about businesses.
Come on.
You're talking about home occupations. They're kind of a protected thing in the Missouri state statutes, and if you're curious about that, Andy.
There's a recent statute, yes.
Yeah, there's a recent statute basically saying as long as they're not causing a ruckus every day, or there's
Employees
some
arriving at the
standards.
house at
A lot of traffic coming to and you can't really touch them, you can't do anything. Now, if just more generally, if a landlord is allowing crimes and ordinance violations to happen from their tenants, and their tenants are committing crimes and ordinance violations, we can, and we've certainly looked at, and I know that we have in the past, gone through the statute that Andy was just talking about, and same thing that we just did with a certain bar and grill, and
Sure, yeah.
Yeah,
pertaining to
I
nuisance.
just want to make sure that we're phrasing things correctly and that we're thinking along the same lines.
yeah, and the only thing you have to be careful there is, are the tenants the persons perpetrating the crime, or are they the victims of the crime?
Right.
So we've touched on the penalty phase, and I, unless anybody's got more to add on that particular portion of this ordinance,
What
let's,
conclusion did we come to then?
Well,
Here's what I got from my notes, and we can incorporate this. We've got, we want to make it clear that there's a general penalty for operating in a business without a license, and that ties to the general penalty section of the Normandy City Code, which is $1,000, not to exceed 90 days imprisonment. We're gonna look
Wait a
into.
minute, hold up. $1,000 period or $1,000 for every violation? Are we
Up to $1,000, and basically it's just a ticket, and then the prosecutor and the judge.
Per violation.
Per violation.
Per violation.
Every ticket is subject to that $1,000.
I don't,
Right, so-
$1,000 per violation or $1,000 per month?
It's per ticket.
per violation.
Per day.
Per ticket.
So-
Well, we're saying two different things. That's why I'm asking Sam, because we're saying two different things. So Sam, what are you saying?
I'm saying that there'll be a general penalty violation in the code for operating a business without a proper business license, which means every day that you're doing that, you can receive a ticket, and the penalty for that ticket can be up to $1,000. So for every day that you're operating without a license, there could be, and very likely would be, a $1,000 fine, assuming everything was correctly done with the ticket.
And that's
it
pretty
makes it
dang
in court.
motivating to get your license.
Oh, that'll shut you down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we'll add a statute clarifying that. Now, you'll still see in the code the late fee penalty, because the late fee is a different thing. And I think maybe that's one thing we do need to address, about a grace period before we start ticketing people, or do we start ticketing people on February 1st? Because being a little late on your renewal application, I think is a little different than blatantly never coming up to City Hall and knowingly not applying.
Well,
for a
and
business
I
license.
mentioned a couple of numbers. I think a definition in the ordinance, what is the definition of operating without a business license? And I would say operating for 120 days without a license. That first 120 days, and I'm, what does everybody else
4
think?
months.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's-
but then what you don't, but we would be careful about how we word it, because then if you never got a license, then you would have 120 days where we couldn't issue a
Right.
ticket. But I just think,
All right, that could apply to renewals only.
right, yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
sure. All right.
So,
And can we
It's a
put
long
on,
period of time to.
can the
get one
ordinance,
suit.
Well, we could go 30, 60, 90.
I'd say 30 days, get it in, oh my
30
goodness.
days, that's 1 month.
right, so how that would look is, February, the first week in February, we look at who's come and applied, and we look who hasn't, and we let them know.
Renewed.
Well, you can come in and pay your 5%, renewed. You come in and pay your 5% late fee. If you don't, we're gonna, come have a talk on March 1st, and you might be receiving a ticket.
Yes,
You probably would.
I like that.
Yeah,
But-
I think it's 120 days is too much.
Yeah.
Okay.
can we put on,
Can we go back to what Andy was talking about? Because he mentioned 3 different.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah, I wanted to just get one issue resolved and everybody on the same
I was
page
gonna say the
first,
same thing.
and then move to the next. So
Yeah.
I'm hearing 30 days on a renewal is plenty of time? Is that?
30, yeah.
Okay, and it's $1,000, up to $1,000 per day, if we choose to write a citation every day, and that gives us some leverage as to how we want to manage any particular situation.
Is that gonna be subjective then? How do you determine if it's up to 1,000, if it's 250, is it 500?
Well, it's gonna be the
The
judge
judge
will
makes-
determine.
The judge will
that.
determine.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
and is everybody okay with citing the person that's maintaining the nuisance and the owner of the property if they're
Yeah.
two
I like
different
that.
entities?
I don't mind it
Wow.
if there's if the owner has some action he could take to facilitate.
I don't know if you can cite the owner.
Yeah.
We can go after the owner
Well, we just
with the
did.
ordinance violation.
For the people that never obtained a
One more
license?
time.
Andy just said that was well within the law.
Yeah, it's a different section of the code, and basically, so that, in that section of the code, and this is separate from business license, this is any ordinance violation. Someone in there, if a tenant is violating any ordinance violation or is committing crimes, then we can issue a notice and have a hearing, an administrative hearing with the landlord, and prove to them that all these crimes are happening, and if it happens again, then it can be revoked. I think that would be, now, in extreme cases, I think that would be good, but for every, late renewal application, I don't think it would be worth
Language in there
it.
that gives us the
because-
arm or the teeth to go after the
Exactly.
owner if we need to.
And that's in 220 under the nuisance code.
I don't think that's what, I don't think that's what I'm talking about.
I think
What
what
are you
Andy's
talking
saying, go ahead, Yolanda.
I wasn't saying that like the owner needs to come every time somebody hasn't renewed. I'm saying if it's an excessive amount of like, when we get to like the 120-day thing.
Right, I was really meaning like that is an option, but it certainly should not be our first
Yeah,
resort.
I wasn't saying like
Yeah.
the first jump at the goal should be calling the business.
I
Or the
am going to do
property
some
owner.
research on what kind of mechanisms are permissible and maybe other cities have for, again, shutting down businesses which are operating without a license, that without having to, again, go after the owner's occupancy or, but something beyond just issuing a fine. And so I'll get in touch with Sam and get back to the council on that.
But
I know.
what Captain Sanders said is to put the wording in, so there's that flexibility to be able to activate it.
Right, and that's all, but I need to figure out what the mechanism looks like, right?
Yeah, and it's, so, and if someone is, like a serious crime, like say prostitution is happening in someone's house, we have to go through hearings and due process to tie that to the landlord. It's not as simple, because really, they're not the ones creating the ordinance violation. So it's not as simple as just writing them a ticket.
Right.
I was
We
referring
issue
to
like
there was a
it's correct.
situation with a certain business that had people residentially living upstairs from the business for probably about 3 or 4 years. And we didn't know until we went in that people were inhabiting it. There had been several fires, there was no running water. And this business owner had businesses on the bottom, and the top it's on Natural Bridge in the corridor, it's not zoned residential. And there are small offices that were being used for residential purposes.
Right.
And that business owner was charging people $700 per room to live in there.
Yeah,
So, I
and
mean,
so as
the
far
owner
as
knew.
we're aware, that's not happening anymore.
No, it just turned
mean,
into
it's-
something different now.
Right.
It's an extreme.
And
That's an extreme
it's
case,
extreme
yeah.
case, and I don't think we need to write anything in the business license code about it. Yeah, that's a whole zoning thing and a nuisance, and we have all the teeth we need
Nuisance.
in our ordinances for that
Okay.
already.
Separate.
So I know, Kiana, you've raised your hand several times. What was your?
I have seen this with other cities, the penalty for operating without a business license, operating a business, has always been referenced, the general penalty, in any code. I have seen this exercise before in the past, is that if someone has been given notice on multiple occasions that, hey, we are aware of the fact that you're operating your business and you have not renewed your license, that either a representative from the administration along with a police officer goes and says, okay, look, obviously, this operating a business within the city is a privilege. That's not just a right. That's what the business license is for. So you let them know, hey, this is the penalty. Have that ticket written at that point. And I'm gonna say this, and I'm not advising that you do this, but then the business closes that day. I have seen that done.
Could you send me an ordinance?
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, and I was actually looking for it while I was here.
Yeah, thank you. Please send that to me.
Yeah, I would like to see that happen, because it's kind of like what Andy was saying about liquor. If you have an illegal liquor business and then somebody sells you a bottle and then they go out and kill somebody in a vehicular homicide, but you didn't shut them down, it's like, can you really just be like, oops, our ordinance doesn't say that? Like, come on.
Well, and I've got to, again, I'll review these ordinances that Kiana will send me. Just because they've been adopted by some city doesn't mean they are legal. So I will do my due diligence to make sure we're not adopting something that, is going to get us sued. We don't need that. But certainly if there is a way to shut down a business that is operating without a license, beyond just continuing to slap them with tickets, which I'll be honest is an administrative headache for the court, for the prosecutor, for everybody involved, right? To do it every single day, right? then I think it would be useful to have something like that in the code. And I'll find something and present that to the council for consideration.
And Yolanda, arrest is an effective remedy to having someone stop doing something that's illegal. So that doesn't preclude that we can't arrest people if we see them committing the violation and they're unagreeable to stopping. Because I can issue a ticket doesn't mean I have to issue a summons. A summons that I give you is actually in lieu of arrest.
Right.
I can arrest anyone at any time on any crime. So if they insist on persisting with the crime, I could arrest them, an officer could arrest them immediately.
Right.
Which would cease and desist the activity.
That would be a serious, yeah, that would just be very discouraging for somebody.
Right, and again,
You might have to
We do
put them
have
and
the
release
tools
them if they got arrested.
if we choose to execute.
and my understanding is a simple reference to the jail penalty, we can do that.
Yes.
And so, and
Correct,
and we'll
but I
make
want
sure
to
that's in
incorporate that to make it very clear, because I
Right.
just don't think the current code is clear
Right,
on that point.
And so, and so we'll look at the grace period of, 30 days before we really start going after them and incorporating that. And then, unless there's any other questions about any of those items, I do want to talk about a couple of the other things because.
I want to add one thing, Sam.
Sure.
If you don't mind. So, with regard to a late fee as opposed to a fee for operating without a license, which again are going to be distinct things, one applying to renewals, one applying to someone who's never had a business license, or maybe they had one 10 years ago, and that we're just counting that as not having one. The way I look at the current late fees in the code, I mean, they're incorporated into the license application fee for the renewal. So we could do that too for the late fees, right? It's
Yeah.
you've been you did have a business license, it expired, you waited 30 days to come get it renewed, so now there's a $100 additional fee that you have to pay. It's not something you have to be sent to court for, and now I have to prove that you were out,
Right.
it's just,
And right now, that's in the ordinance that was presented as 5% per month, up to 25%, and that's what was in our old ordinance.
Right.
Now, some people, that's gonna be $50, and it'll come out at $62. Some people have much larger, business license fees. Some up to $10,000, and that 5% is gonna be much larger.
and that's a fair and commensurate way to do it.
Well, and on that note, I think our minimum business license fee of $50 is ridiculous.
Right.
I think we could double that.
Yeah,
Well, and that's a separate issue, which we can discuss.
Which, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be in this ordinance.
Right,
so-
and what I want to kind of do, because I didn't get a chance to, at the last meeting, because we didn't have a first reading, is kind of go through what this proposed ordinance changes as compared to the last one, and some of the problems that we're trying to fix that we haven't even talked about yet.
Right.
One of, and really the main thing is the old ordinance is very unclear. It's hard to read, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it fails to distinguish between retail businesses and non-retail businesses. So our previous business license collects a fee off of gross sales for retail businesses.
Yes.
So if you sell stuff and you sell goods, then you report your gross sales, and then we collect the fee and the tax off of, the license tax off of that. But if you're an office, a barber shop, if you're not selling widgets, you're providing services, that doesn't really work because you're not a retail merchant. So this creates two different classes of merchants. One is a retail merchant, so we can still collect a license fee based off of gross sales for retail merchants. And then it also creates other classes of merchants who are service-based, and it collects a fee based off of, in the proposed ordinance, it's square footage. In other ordinances, I've seen, they have a big, long list of all the different types of businesses one can operate, and then they list out the fee one by one. So,
Can any service be considered a fee? A fee for service is the same as a sale to some degree, isn't it?
yeah, it gets tricky though, because
It's not retail.
it's not, yeah, it's not retail, it's, and not, do they report their tips, and
Right.
and that's the problem we're trying to fix, is because people come to the window and they say, how much do I pay? And they're a service-based business. And it just doesn't really make sense.
Right.
And they have to go through their numbers and usually you just say, well, do whatever you reported on your taxes, but depending on what you do, that can vary widely and it may not be very fair.
Right.
Like what would you do for a bank? Right, I mean, it doesn't make sense. So you have a flat fee for a bank, or you go off of square footage. What would you do for an office that is a call center? They have no gross sales.
What do you suggest then? I mean,
Square footage or call centers, $500. I mean, that's the two
so
ways of
have
doing it.
that list. If
And
it
in the
is-
proposed ordinance, we did square footage because you can get that information fairly easily from the county website. Or for new businesses, upon inspection, we can try and grab
Yeah,
it.
we can say, if you want a business license, you have to come let us, measure out the square footage,
Yeah.
Or provide a number, and if we look at it and we're like, I
Right,
think
and
that's.
I think the ordinance says, we tell them what the number is, and if they want to fight it, they can fight it, and so.
Like an assessment, pretty much.
Yeah, kind of, except for it's way more objective
Right.
and easy to do. I mean, that's all on the county assessor's website, and square footage and stuff.
That's it.
And it's uniformly applicable, which is fair and equitable to any and all other businesses that are non-retail. That way you just codify it, make it as even as possible.
Yeah, so, and I agree, and Chesterfield does all square footage, Maryland Heights does square footage. We're kind of taking a dual approach to where retail businesses, we're doing it. And I think there's also manufacturers who sell goods. I gotta brush up on the ordinance before the next meeting, but there's also a separate calculation for manufacturers. But that's, and then in addition to that, it clarifies a lot of things that just aren't in the old ordinance and gets rid of some stuff that is not useful or not relevant. And that's what the proposed ordinance does.
So I want to ask and just open the floor, is there anything that you would like to see this ordinance accomplish that hasn't been addressed?
I didn't see anything about Airbnbs.
Yeah. That is a,
How does that work?
yeah, that's a hot topic. So I think that would need to be a separate ordinance, because in Airbnb isn't, I don't know, that's an Andy question.
Most cities are regulating that through the zoning code.
Yeah.
So my understanding, based on what other attorneys in my office have advised their clients on with regard to this question, is that Airbnbs do not fall. So again, as I've previously explained, as a third-class city, Normandy only has the power to require a business license of businesses that are specifically listed in the relevant statute, which is section 94-110. There's a separate statute for fourth-class cities, but it's very similar. Most attorneys are, and I mean, I could look into this, but I'm inclined to agree with them that Airbnbs are not falling under those enumerated businesses. So you cannot require a business license. Now, some cities have done so, but those are charter cities, which have much more leeway in how they approach these issues, right? They're not basically bound by statute. They can kind of do whatever they want unless the Constitution says they can't. But as a third-class city, Normandy can only do what the statutes say it can do.
So we define them as a situation where they're just renting out their facility like an Airbnb.
I think what he's saying is, we can't really address the problem with the business license code, but we can bring a separate ordinance that addresses short-term rentals.
Right, it's not about how we
And work
define
it into
things,
the
it's about how the legislature has defined, they have listed, here are the 100 different businesses or whatever it is. It's a, I mean, this is it. It's a giant block of text, you
And I
know?
think ice makers.
And, oh yeah, it's
and
ice dealers and hackmen, corn doctors. That's my favorite one, you know? I don't know what that is.
I remember Tumblr being on there, but corn dog.
So, you know, so that's the point, and this statute hasn't been updated since 1953. That's just what we're dealing with, right?
Besides, Airbnbs have already paid real estate taxes anyway.
So I think addressing that through the zoning code is really the best way to handle Airbnbs.
Is that something the council would like to see in the
Do we
near
have any
future?
Airbnbs? I don't think so.
Yeah, we have one.
Yeah, we do.
We do. I don't know if we're supposed to talk about this right
It's
now.
on, I think it's on St. Mary's.
Well, then there.
Well, let's not talk about addresses or streets. I think we can talk about Airbnbs in general without
I'm quite sure you got
What about,
They come for 2 weeks.
But
move
let's do this.
I do
Let's do
think
this.
if, well, go ahead, Mayor.
Well, I say, we're not,
I know.
if we've decided that Airbnbs can't be addressed in this ordinance, let's not discuss Airbnbs at this
Right.
time.
We'll have a separate, let's have a separate
Yeah,
workshop
separate
at the
workshop.
next one.
I'm
What
not
about,
gonna solve anything right now.
what about vending machines and slot machines?
So vending machines are a separate statute, and I would need to brush up on that a little bit before I start pontificating on that.
Yeah,
No.
and we currently do have a vending machine ordinance in our code, and it's in a different article of the same section, and this ordinance does not address the vending machines. It doesn't change anything, so the old ordinance stands.
Is it the same with slot machines?
And I think slot machines, I think amusement devices are in there as well.
Right.
And I'll just be very frank, we do need to work on some of the enforcement of the vending machines, because I'm not sure if we have any registered
What
vending
part of
machines.
those two located?
What's that?
In what article are those two located? Or what section, sorry?
Yeah. Let me,
Amusement devices are chapter 605, article 5.
that is correct.
Where are vending machines?
And the other,
605, section 5? No.
Chapter 605, article 5, all the way at the bottom.
I think Maryland Bates has.
605-290.
This says the chapter, article, division, and or section assignments designated in this or is that it?
Well, so are you on the Normandy code, the E-code page?
No, I'm looking at the ordinance. I thought you were talking about the new.
No, this is a totally separate section of the code.
Yeah, the council bill does not address vending machines at all. We can work it into there.
Or slot machines.
Or slot machines.
So it's not in this?
It's not in the council bill. It is already a part of our code. Right now, merchandise vending machines selling items in excess of 4 cents has a tax of $3 per machine.
Is that enforced?
Oh, I see.
No, frankly, I don't think we have any vending machines registered. It's something we need to work on getting enforced. But right now, I know that there was a vending machine in the mortuary across the street that probably was from the late 90s, maybe earlier, I don't know, and it had a City of Normandy vending machine sticker on it. So at one point it was enforced, but I've never seen a file of vending machines before.
There
So,
are slot machines.
So
What
I,
about the slot machines?
Yeah, I don't,
Section 605.
I haven't observed vending machines.
You need, for slot machines, you would need gambling.
yeah.
I mean, my understanding is that, right, gambling machines are illegal outside of casinos. There's
Yeah,
talk
We were
about,
told
that's-
that at a
that's only
location.
allowed
They're in the,
So
they're in
here's,
the
think
gas
about
stations.
right down the
they should
street.
not be.
So 605,
By my
300.
I've been talking about this for 3 years, John.
Yes.
They've been ching-chinging for about
Yeah.
5 years.
They brought it up and they said it was okay
You
to
keep
have.
telling me it's okay. I've been bringing it up for 3 years. They got gambling
If you
machine
walk in
down
the
here at the
door,
gas station.
all the way to the
right.
right,
And
They're
you
there.
walk
in the
in
back,
there and
and
it
it'd
smells
be
like
jam
marijuana.
packed.
All right, well, that's something that's
I don't
gonna have
go
to
in
be researched as
And
far
they're
as.
sitting back in the back, sitting there for
But-
hours.
Question, everybody's like, oh, no, it's okay, it's
Captain
okay.
Sanders said there was an okay for that.
Yeah.
One of the last meetings, come back in.
Captain Sanders, would you care to tell us about the,
No, thanks, I'm good, but we've got a
Thank you.
question.
the machine that appears like a slot machine at the BP?
The no chance machine?
They consider it a gaming machine,
Three or four
not
of them up
a
there.
But they're putting
a
money in.
slot machine.
So
We
it's-
we had someone contact the gaming commission about that specifically, and when someone from the gaming commission came down and said it didn't fit the narrative or fit the description for the gaming commission as a slot machine or a gambling machine.
Right, so my understanding is that these machines have a button or something that you can press on them, and you press the button and it'll tell you whether or not you're going to win
Right.
before you put your money in, right?
So that's not a
because,
slot machine.
right, now you don't have to press the button, right? You can put your money in and pull the lever,
Yeah.
but because you can press it to see if you'll win, it's not a gambling device, right?
Those things have been in there for almost a decade. We've been trying to get them out of there for a long time because because it pulls people in there. And that's, a lot of times it's some of the unsavory people that just sit there all day
One
long.
of the questions that I have is, if they're being taxed, well, how much are they being taxed?
So the gambling machine is prohibited in our code, so there is no tax for a gambling machine.
For the gaming machines, we've established that they're not gambling now.
Right, so there, and I guess we do need to
Because
maybe
I
go
would think
ask,
that-
because in
I
our
would
city,
think that the amount of revenue that one of those machines generates
Huge.
should
Yeah,
be
so-
pretty huge, and it should be taxed accordingly.
and we can look into that. Right now, the fee for a mechanical amusement device, and I don't know if that would fit this definition,
money.
Yes.
is $50 per machine.
For how, I mean, every year?
Yeah, annual fee.
So I will say, I do think, like, if it's $50 a year, there's a good opportunity to update this code. But if you look at the structure of the Normandy Code, the business license code and the amusement device license are separate sections of the code.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is important stuff to talk about. I'm really not trying to stifle discussion here, but we might want to focus back on the business license per se, which is what we're here to discuss.
Yeah.
And have another opportunity to discuss Airbnb.
Well, we're
Because
just-
obviously.
We're learning what falls under this ordinance and what does not
Yeah.
fall under.
Correct, and I don't think this would fall
This
under
one
this,
does not.
it's a separate, it's in the same
Okay.
chapter, but it's not in the same
So
ordinance.
what would snow removal, trash cans, dumpsters, and condition of premises fall under?
Are you talking about like people
talking
who
about
leave
business
their
license?
trash cans out and don't pull them back in? Or,
I'm talking about, for instance, most of the businesses that are on Natural Bridge do not have trash cans. designated trash cans.
so again, that's not a business license issue, that's more of a code enforcement, property maintenance
Okay.
issue, which would, you know, there's gonna be a general section of the code that's applicable to all properties in the city
So
that
that's
have.
something that we need to address under the,
It is addressed under
it's-
business in one of the municipalities of snow removal and trash cans. I forget which one it's from. And they have it under
Under the
business.
business license code, see, I think.
But we don't have to follow that. but-
You worry, you know, you start to, you don't want to muddy things up too much, right? You want to have something, a section of the code that is more generally applicable that deals with trash cans and snow removal and not start sticking that under the business license code because then
But
it just
I
gets.
thought that, now in Maryland Heights, their code, like Debbie was saying, it does have that snow removal and trash can thing in it. But I thought that when you came and got a business license, one of the things that you had to do or at Maryland Heights was also say that you were going to have a trash can, like a city issued trash can.
Let me look at that.
I would think,
I mean, I'm sure there's a section of the Normandy code, without rattling off the top of my head, that
mean, we-
requires trash.
But is
Yeah,
that something that we need to, that you're saying that should be better addressed in like, if we decided that it would be like a condition of keeping the business license, or like if we say that someone's in violation of being a nuisance property?
Yeah, so, that would be a nuisance. We do require that you have sanitation service in the city of Normandy. When we divested our sanitation services about this time last year, we passed a new ordinance saying that you have to have trash service. And, I think it applied to commercial businesses as well. And that's a nuisance, and if they're failing to, if a certain business has a bunch of nuisances that they're not addressing, then that's when we can get into business license revocation. If the ticketing and notice of violations isn't working, then we can use those violations of the other sections of the code to go after them through revocation, is my understanding.
But we cannot make it a condition of getting a business license that they have to have a trash can at their door.
What you
It's
want,
a,
Yolanda?
it's just required in the city of Normandy anyways. So if someone doesn't have a trash can, then they can receive a ticket, or at the very least, a notice of violation. And
There's a whole lot of businesses that don't have trash cans in front of their.
please, send me and let me know, and we'll
You
get
could just
Yeah, that
drive down
sounds
the
like
street and see.
enforcement issue rather than a deficiency in the code. Looking at Maryland Heights, I don't see where it references trash can.
I think it's section,
I do see removal of snow and ice.
it's 13-33, 13-34.
That's 33 is removal of snow and
It's
ice.
13-34.
34, no license shall be issued. Do not fully comply with the requirements of the building maintenance, fire, and health codes. Well, I think that's a general thing that we've been talking about incorporating anyway, is that in order to be issued a license, or for your license to be renewed, you have to be in compliance with the other codes, other city codes, which would include elsewhere in the code, a trash can requirement. So it makes reference to other portions of the code, which may be more generally applicable to all property owners. It doesn't necessarily, you see kind of, it doesn't explicitly say trash cans, but it does so by reference. And I think that we are proposing to incorporate something like that into the proposal that's under discussion.
Okay.
And as far as the removal of snow and ice, I would want to do a little bit more research on including something like that, because with sidewalks, like the sidewalk in front of your house, I mean, it kind of depends on the way the code is written in any given city that someone lives in, but if someone slips on the ice in front of your sidewalk and you didn't do anything to remove that snow or ice, you are not liable for it, because that's just the way it naturally fell, and it's not your obligation to get out there and remove the sidewalk. But if you do go shovel the snow, and then it freezes, then freezing rain comes down, to your sidewalk slick, now you're in trouble, because that otherwise would not have, right? So I don't know.
So don't shovel is the key.
Well, for a long time, you not know.
Right, well, put salt down if you want, yeah, right, but it just opens a can of worms that I don't want to really, the question becomes, well, if the city's requiring this business to remove snow and ice, and then something happens due to that removal, is the city now somehow on the hook? You see what I'm saying? It opens up a can of worms that I'm not necessarily.
I have seen other cities. I have been to other municipalities where businesses shovel and put salt down. So you're telling me that this is what I don't understand about some of the things that we talk about. It's like, well, do we really want to? And it's like, I have to travel outside of my area to go to the grocery store because we don't have one. And I specifically go to a certain area to the grocery store because I know that the area is going to be shoveled. I know that it's going to be clean. I know that it's going to be safe. So what I don't understand is, when we're talking about the mission and the vision of Normandy, and we're talking about what we want to see in our neighborhoods and the things that we want to see and the types of businesses that we want to see come here and the types of business owners that we want to have, why would we not hold our community to a standard where we would want people to have the basic shoveling and putting salt down, especially if you're going to tell me that you have a business where you're pulling down, let's say $10,000 a month. You mean to tell me you can't go buy a $20 bag of salt?
So as the council, it is your job to think about what kind of policies you would want to impose in the city and whether or not, requiring a business to remove snow and ice on their property is the right policy for the city of Normandy is the council's decision. Now, whether there are any legal ramifications to that, that's where I come in, right? And if this is something that the council wants to consider, I agree, as a policy, I totally agree with you. It sounds very nice to make sure that everyone has clean driveways, clean sidewalks, right? My concern as the city's attorney is whether that requirement could come back and bite the city. And so I'd be happy to do a little research on that issue, if we want to consider
Well, and
something
again,
like this.
this proposed ordinance is going to make reference to existing ordinances that regulate businesses. So if we want to write into our ordinance that they're required to do that, then they would have to comply. But I'm not sure we want to write a bunch of ordinance into the business license application ordinance.
Yeah, and so,
I'm not talking about the business license application. I completely understand that the two things are separate, but what I'm saying is when we're talking about how we want our businesses to look, and we talk about what kind of presentation we want to present to the community, then I think that it's important that we talk about, things like having trash cans. We talk about things like snow removal. We talk about things like having a dumpster, designated to your business. I think those are things that we need to talk about. That's what I'm saying.
Let me offer this. Let's let Annie get back to us on whether snow removal in front of a business creates any liability for the city. Is this a good idea or not? And then we can more intelligently have that conversation with a legal opinion at hand.
I'll take a look at that.
and we can pass it as a separate ordinance and.
Yeah, we could fit that under a
enforce it
building
as a
code or
separate-
something.
Yeah.
There's any number of ways we could,
It's a safe.
we could fit that in. It doesn't have to be.
There's a lot of ordinance that we could incorporate that provision in.
Yeah, totally.
I think what Yolanda is saying is that being upfront with the businesses and say, we expect this. Is that what you're doing, Yolanda?
Well, I'm saying that our community should, if we talk about the mission and the vision of Normandy, and we talk about how we want to be a global leader and we want these businesses to come and everything like that, and we believe that our community is worth it, then why can't we hold ourselves to the same standard that you would hold? You want us to look at a Maryland Heights, you want us to look at a Chesterfield, you want us to look at a Clayton and everything, you want us to look at their ordinances, then how come we can't hold ourselves to that standard?
No, I don't think anybody disagrees with that.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'll look into that issue. Where were we on the general business license? I know we had talked about, we had started talking about, I'm just going to kind of bring it back to the kind of tripartite penalty scheme that I talked about. We had talked about what happens if someone is operating without a business license. There's also the question of what to do when someone has been operating without a business license and they come apply for a business license. And I know I've offered an opinion on this before, and I think this is kind of what started this whole question, was a question about a business that had done just this. So as I've explained, the business license code sets out certain conditions, A, B, C, right? And any applicant who meets those conditions, they get a business application, right? It's considered a ministerial duty, they get the business license. It's considered a ministerial duty of the city. It is not one that the city officials have discretion to decide, well, I don't like the way you've been behaving for the last 6 months, so I'm not going to give you a business license. If they meet conditions A, B, and C, they get the business license. So what you, the council, can do is decide what kind of conditions you want to impose on any applicant for a business license. And that may include a condition that any applicant for a business license has not been in violation of any city ordinances, including operating without a business license for some period of time prior to the application. I think 6 months to a year would be reasonable. I think anything beyond that, certainly a permanent ban on a business license for someone who's previously operated without one would be challenged. Just because somebody gets caught driving without a driver's license doesn't mean they can never have a driver's license in the state of Missouri. But something like that is certainly a condition that could be added.
So right back to that same, at what point, if they come in and they've been operating for 60 days without a business license?
Yeah, but this is separate than renewals, right?
No, I'm not talking about renewal.
Right.
I'm talking about somebody that's been operating a business, oh crap, they require a business license, let me go in and
So
get it.
right now, the proposed council bill, the proposed council
In the
bill
context of renewals, right?
states that no license shall be issued if the location of the business has not met the relevant occupancy requirements set out in chapter 500 of this code or the relevant zoning regulations set out in 405 of this code. Now, based on the discussion here tonight and previously, we can add other sections of the code, like nuisance violations, sanitation, and we can even add something about the clause that we had talked about. If, you operated for this long without a business license, then you can't get one for a year or.
I mean, would council members like to see something like that in the code?
Is that the CIS probation you were talking about?
No, that's separate. That's what happens if someone is operating without a business license, they get ticketed in the municipal court. No, what I'm talking about is when someone has been operating without a business license and then they realize, oh, I didn't realize I need to get one.
Is
And
there a
then
30-day grace?
well, but I thought that 30-day grace period was for renewals. This is for a new business license. Someone moves into town, I'm gonna open a business, and then I'm operating and, oh, I didn't realize I need a business license. I've been operating for 6 months, I didn't even know it, Now, I hope we wouldn't allow someone to get away with it for that long, but,
So they get charged day by day, right?
No, this is a different scenario.
Right, so yeah, no, that's in terms of charging them. What I'm talking about is what happens when that person then comes in and says, I want a business license. I've been operating without one, I'm sick of paying all these fines, I want a business license, right? If they meet the requirements of the code as they currently set out, we have to give it to them, right? Is that the kind of thing that is okay?
No.
Or do we want there to be some sort of requirement that you can't just operate until you get caught and then get a business license and make the whole thing legit, right?
Well, and I think that goes back to the
I say-
definition
I
of
say
what is
shut 'em down.
operating without a business license.
But I think that has
That's why we
to
made
do,
this decision.
Yeah.
If
But
you
that
go
has to
months
do with-
and years without a business license and you come in here and try to get a business license, we should be able to shut you down. You know what I mean?
but I'm not
Like,
talking
hey,
about shutting down, I'm not
see
talking about renewals, I'm not talking about imposing a fine for operating without a business license. I'm talking about the very specific scenario where which is the next step, which is where someone comes in, they say, I want a business license.
And they've been
And
operating
you've
for
been
a
operating,
year.
and they've been operating without one. Do we give them a business license? That's what I want the council to answer.
Outlined what we were gonna do after a discussion.
I would say
What
no.
were we gonna do in that situation?
Well,
Where would
under
we-
the current code,
They can,
we had to issue them the business license.
Correct, because they met the conditions.
They met the conditions.
There was no condition.
And what Andy's is talking about, would you like us to add a condition in this code? And I'm getting a sense, yes, saying if you've been in violation of the business code section, then we will not issue a license.
For what, 6 months?
That's what I want to know from the council. 6 months, a year, what seems like a fair requirement to say, John Smith, you, in order to get a business license, you have to have not been operating without a license for this period of time prior to your application. Does that make sense?
Yes.
1 year. I
1
like
year?
that.
and then you have to look at what type of business that we're dealing with. If you're dealing with, for instance, a beauty salon, and they burn somebody's scalp, and that person has to go to the emergency room, and they don't have a business license. So should they be able to come in and say, hey, I want to get a business license? I didn't have a business license for over a year, but I want to apply for one now.
Well, it's gonna be harder to discriminate what.
If they were operating without one, and then
Yeah.
it'd be, you know.
Fine.
Yeah, I think one of the things
Yeah.
you're getting at is for professional things like hairstylists are things that might require licensing,
Exactly.
proof of proper licensing or barber.
Yeah, because you got a lot of barbers, like, you know,
Depends
Santos
on
was
them
saying,
personally.
they've been
though.
cutting hair for years without license.
But that's on them
Just like the guy down
personally, there would
over,
be a
you know.
suit against them as a person because of them not having a.
Yeah, but I don't think they should be operating in the city of Norman.
Oh, I
Because
see.
I have to question some of those guys
I
down at the
see.
Wiggins that's cutting hair.
Well, we're addressing that though. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where we're
Right,
at.
what kind of conditions when somebody, well, I mean, let's forget about for now, forget about the operating without a business license aspect. When someone comes into the city of Normandy and say, I want a business license to operate my business in the city of Normandy, what kind of, I mean, what are the conditions that we want to see? Because right now, what is it right now?
Right now, it's, do you meet occupancy, meaning have you passed an inspection? Does it fit the zoning? Do you have worker comp coverage if you have over
Well,
4
are you
employees?
certified in your specialty, maybe, and that?
Right, and then, yeah, and
You can provide any state required license.
Yeah.
Required
Barber,
license.
hairdresser, whatever
Yeah.
it might be.
Sure, yes.
okay,
Which it should be hanging on the wall.
Yeah.
Right.
right.
Like if you have a nail salon, you have to be
It
licensed.
has to be on the wall.
Okay,
Okay,
that's fair.
Can I add something? Once again, the oversight. We have a person in position in the city that's a code violation person, right?
Yes.
Code enforcement.
And code enforcement. His job is to make sure nobody's sitting in our city for 6 months without paying. You know, that is his job, to go out there and make sure these new businesses, we don't have 1,000.
Well, and
businesses.
hopefully it won't happen. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But we don't have 1,000 businesses, so if we got 25 businesses, I think that part of his job as a code person
To go in.
to go in and make sure you got a new business here, and do you have your license? You know, that's his job. We pay him.
Right.
A lot of this stuff was done prior to.
Yeah, I'm talking about prior, yeah, I understand.
Where
So we
it
shouldn't
was
have
just
those
a
problems
handshake.
again.
So-
buddy.
Right, so we shouldn't be able to have those problems.
You're right. We hopefully we're
Right.
not gonna
That's what I'm
experience
saying.
these
You know,
problems in
So,
the
the
future.
codes, violations, I understand, let's do those things, but we shouldn't have to.
Well, one, is there, and don't tell me now, but is there any business that you're aware of right now that does not have a business license, and we will go
At
address it?
this point, I don't know.
Okay.
I might know of.
Okay, you might know, and there very well might be, because with limited staff and limited resources, you
Right.
can only address, you cannot address all the code violations, it's
Exactly.
impossible.
Exactly. We're a third-class city. We don't have a budget like Chesterfield or Kirkwood or Ladue, $80, $100 million budget, so we don't have that type of budget.
Did you get your question answered, Andy, as to what?
I mean, 6 months or a year, show of hands.
So you're talking about they're not going to
I say
issue
a
a
year.
license?
I hear a year from Yolanda, yeah, right, you know,
6 months.
I
because
think
we are,
6 months is
I think
good.
6 months.
6 months, it sounds good to me.
6 months
30
seems
days,
to have it.
30 days for the one, 6 months for the
Yeah, I
other.
think that's
And you know,
fair. If you
realistically,
look at it all the way across.
if they have a lease and they're told they can't operate for 6 months, they're probably gonna leave.
Exactly.
So I think it accomplishes.
Yeah, exactly, right. Because otherwise, you know, I think we have in the proposed amendment, you know, the new code, enough in here for reasons for denial, which is that, you know, the business cannot be delinquent in taxes, they can't be in violation of any other codes, and this just makes it very clear.
So this 6-month moratorium on issuing a business license is if they've been operating for how long without a business license?
Right.
Well, and that's why it doesn't apply to renewals, right? It would not apply to renewals. It would, I mean, I guess that's the question is if someone comes in and, it's a great question. If someone comes in and opens a business on January 1st, and then they're operating for 2 days, and then the city comes in and says, sorry, you don't have a business license, you can't operate. And they go, oh, I didn't know, I need to get a business license. Are we saying they can't get one till June? Right, I mean, that seems to be very different.
Right.
So
Agreed.
a year, you operate for one without a year, you can't have one for 6 months. Is that a policy
Well,
that
6
sounds
months
fair?
to 6 months, maybe.
6 months is, I mean,
And that'd be
Or
nice.
6 months and 6 months.
That's
Right, I
never-
think 6 months and 6
Yeah.
months.
the only thing where it could get tricky is proving how long they've been operating without a business license.
Right, that's where it can get.
And that's even more the reason to make it.
And
6
really,
months and not a
really,
year.
realistically, this is only to deal with like longtime offenders who decide that they want to,
Right.
get the city off their back, right? This is, we'll play around with the language, but let's start with 6 months and 6
Okay.
months.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you have the information you need to put a draft together?
Sam, I think we do.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, it's the same as the other draft. Clarify the general penalty, what we just talked about with, past business license violations, adding grace periods, adding proof of professional licenses if required by the state. And that's what I have that is not currently in the one that was brought to the November meeting.
Right.
Okay. All right,
Good.
I think we're good to move on, unless I hear objection otherwise.
Move on.
We'll have a first reading of this at the regular meeting in December.
Okay.
All right, item number 3, discussion of the legislative process. And this is gonna, well, I'll just let Andy take over.
Okay, so let me preface this by saying, I think the purpose of having a discussion here is to try to figure out if what is currently the default is sufficient for the purposes of the council in terms of how we bring bills to the council and consider them for adoption and creating an ordinance. So I want to explain what the process is now and just make sure the council knows all of their powers that they have. So right now, the adoption of ordinances, the enactment of ordinances is governed by Missouri statute. In Chapter 77, which Chapter 77 regulates third-class cities, there is a similar statute in 79, which regulates fourth-class cities. Basically, a bill has to be introduced in writing, right, which that's what we do. We always, unlike a resolution, right, as we can make resolutions directing the mayor to approve a contract, right? That can be done by just making an oral motion, right? But an ordinance, a bill and ordinance have to be done in writing. So it's introduced in writing, it's read twice, either by title or in full, and to be able to read something by title, you have to have previously made the text of the bill available to the public. And then it has to be adopted by a majority roll call vote, where everyone says, Rick Nelson, aye, Debbie Rosso, aye. So the Normandy City Code adopts the language of the statute and adds a requirement, whereas both readings can occur at a single meeting under the state statute with a majority vote. Under the Normandy ordinance, in order to proceed from a first to a second reading at a single meeting, there has to be a unanimous vote to proceed. To proceed, so what happens is, let's say Steve makes a motion for a first reading. We have a bill for a business license, and Steve says, I make a motion for a first reading. Then we have a vote for the first reading. Excuse me, we don't have to have the vote for, we just have the first reading, the mayor reads, and then we have a motion to approve the first reading, right? And so that can just be done by majority, right? Then if someone wants to have that second reading, maybe it's some sort of must-pass legislation that has to get done that night. For example, remember those, the ordinance for setting the tax rates has to be done on a very quick timeline, right? Someone would make a motion to have a second reading, and that would have to be unanimously approved. Otherwise, the second reading just happens at the mayor's discretion at the next meeting, right? Of course.
Go ahead, you first, then I've got it.
Unanimous amongst council members who are present for that meeting.
Great question.
Or
Let me check.
unanimous of majority or unanimous of quorum.
That is a great question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's good.
Unanimous meaning 4 out of 5 if you have a quorum, or 3 out of 2.
That's not unanimous.
It's not unanimous.
A motion for 2 readings of a bill at a single meeting shall require the unanimous consent of the members of the council voting on such motion. So those members present.
Unanimous of the people at the meeting.
Right.
Right.
I've got a question. I've never asked for a motion to approve a first reading. Typically, there's the first reading, and then,
Yep.
We
Yeah,
have,
and going forward,
for
yeah,
the, didn't we for the parks?
yeah,
okay,
Before.
Yeah, we have before.
yeah.
Yeah,
to approve the first reading?
yes, we've done it before.
And we always should have.
Okay.
Yes.
So, we have a motion to approve the first reading. And then, if it's approved, then at the next meeting, there is a second reading unless there is a motion to have the second meeting that night. And then, right, so that's, I mean, that's it, right? That's the process. Now, as far as sending bills to workshops, I mean, that can be done, let's say we have a first reading. And as a matter of practice, it is always good to have a first reading to get the process started, right? So let's say there's a business license bill, we have a first reading, the first reading is approved, and then Tony says, I think this needs more work, I make a motion to send this to a workshop, right? And then the council can vote whether or not to send it to a workshop. That's not explicitly spelled out anywhere in the statutes or in the code.
Well, I will suggest we can create our own policy as to how we want to do this. And that's what this discussion is there some disagreement on when should we go to a workshop and when can this be managed in a regular meeting? And I think after the first reading of any bill, if we want our practice to be, do we want to take this to a workshop? We can just ask for that motion and vote, and if the majority wants to take it to workshop, we take it to workshop. If it's something simple that we can manage in regular session, and I'd like to see more of our business managed in regular session without the meetings becoming too cumbersome. Does that sound like a reasonable approach? We don't need to put it in ordinance, we can just, as a matter of practice.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, if you adopt a policy that always requires a bill to go to workshop, then we always have to do that, right?
Right, and we would also have to build in mechanisms, like fail-safe mechanisms, to avoid having must-pass legislation get caught up in the process. Again, once again, with the tax rate ordinances, I mean, St. Louis County, they got their tax rates out miraculously early, and by miraculously early this year, I mean a month. Usually, they put those things out like 2 weeks before the deadline, right? So you've got to jump on those and pass them fast. And so there's just, we can't afford to have those getting caught up in some sort of automatic workshop mechanism, right? So, and again, the council members, sorry, Mayor, the council members have the power to ask that things be sent to a workshop right now. They have that power. You just have to speak up and say, I think this needs more work, I make a motion to send this to a workshop. Now, what we could do to make that more feasible, rather than sending it to a workshop, and then we all have to get together and schedule the workshop, we could schedule a standing workshop meeting.
I would like to do
Yes.
that.
I like that, yeah.
St. Anne does that, a lot of cities do
Yes.
that. We schedule a standing workshop meeting, and if there's nothing going that month, then, we all reach out and we say, we're gonna cancel it,
I like that.
But it's a lot easier to just have a standing workshop, that way, we can send stuff to it if we need, and it's just, we know it's
Well,
there.
we've got cities that use this chambers on the second Thursday and the third or the fourth Thursday.
Get the
And
calendar.
I need to get the calendar out because they by ordinance have established their meeting dates.
Right.
So we need to pick a date
Look at the calendar.
Well, why don't we look at the calendar, and again, I think this is something, this is a scheduling issue, I don't think it's a policy issue, I think it's one that could be conducted via email. If you wanted to send out the dates that are available to the
Sure.
calendar.
Well, let's not wait
Generally-
4 weeks to get.
Well, I agree, let's not do that.
Well, generally, it's the third Monday and the third Thursday that are the problem. The third Monday is Pasadena Park, and the third Thursday is Bellary Bakers.
So pick a day.
Is there always a
Everyone
fourth
said
Thursday every
Thursday
month?
was,
Yeah, there's always.
There's
four.
always a fourth
There's always
Thursday?
4 days, 4 of every day,
Okay.
at least.
We've got nobody that uses this council chamber, as far as I'm aware, the fourth Thursday of the month.
let's do it, fourth
Fourth
Thursday.
Thursday.
But it's Glen Echo's meeting, they're the only
Second
ones.
Thursday.
The second Thursday. So,
All
yeah,
right. Woo. Quick.
Fourth Thursday of the-
That was quick.
Now, I
Not really.
also, and I want to do this so that staff doesn't have to work 14-hour days. If we're gonna have a workshop, have it as early as any of us can make it. And not stretch that day out. So, Tony, you're the one that seems to have the most difficulty getting off work, so.
Well, I get off at 4:30, but I mean, what time does work? We start at 6:30. That's no problem for me.
Well, 6:30, I'm hoping to make it even earlier,
Yeah,
like 5:30.
yeah, but it's okay.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
I
it
don't
just,
sit here to 9:30.
Yeah.
right, no, that's
Yeah.
right, yeah. So is everybody
Okay,
good
nice.
with
We,
5:30 on the
stuff
fourth Thursday?
Yes.
Yes. And then
And
we
then,
should,
when we'll determine at the regular meeting if we need to go to workshop.
and can we limit the times of the workshop?
Well, I try, I try to stay focused, I
because
try
we're
to bring
going
it
on
back.
3 hours right now.
Right, no, it's,
But I mean, that's why we want to have workshops and not be doing this kind of discussion at a regular meeting where there's also all the
Exactly, but
reports and
3
stuff.
hours
Because
long
then
and
it's,
the residents go, ah,
Oh,
and
yeah.
your day is long and.
right, so I do want to make a comment on that. Now, the regular sessions do last a while. They have ranged from an hour and 30 to about 3 hours. And I went through on all the regular meetings. Usually, the report of officers takes about 45 minutes, and usually, depending on how big the agenda is, the business takes about 45 minutes.
Shrink the agenda.
Right. So, but at the same time, I think it is important to discuss business at a regular meeting, because that's where the people are.
well, no,
And
you're
you
right.
don't want to send things to workshop to avoid, or not to avoid, but you don't want to give that appearance that you're avoiding speaking.
No,
In front of
but
people.
the workshops are open to the public, one.
Sure.
Two, we can do a summary at the council meetings of what we've discussed here.
Well, and also, and it goes to something else that I want to stress, is I think we should always have first readings. There's no reason not to have a first reading.
Yes.
We'll present the bill, and like on the business license ordinance, their staff did not get a chance to present what was in the new ordinance. So we even came into this workshop without even having to gone through what the proposed changes were. And so, and now we had to do it at the workshop. So always have the first reading, allow staff to present what the new bill is, have a brief discussion about it, and then take those points from discussion into the workshop. And then at the workshop, if we don't get it figured out, and we don't have to have the second reading at the next meeting. We don't. We can put off the second reading for a year if we want to. I mean, in perpetuity, we can just keep working on this thing if we need to. But that first reading is important because it allows the bill to start and to present, and then we can take it to workshop from there.
Right, and I think, there's gonna be a little bit of experimentation, we're trying to streamline this process, so, I think it's a good idea to see how this procedure works, having the first reading. If someone wants to see more work, we have a motion to send it to workshop, we have it at the regularly scheduled workshop, and then if, everyone thinks it's good, or a majority thinks it's good, we send it back for a second reading, right, and give a summary or something.
For me,
right?
as a perfunctory standpoint, it was strange to me. For instance, we had the introduction of the flock camera system, for instance. You know, it was brought to the city council meeting. We had a workshop. We discussed it. I thought we were mostly clear. Then we went to city council meeting, and then it was tabled and set to workshop again. I was not.
We never had a workshop about flock.
Oh, sure.
Yes, we did.
October 25th, we talked about an hour and 15 minutes of it.
That's a workshop.
Oh, I don't
And
remember.
that's where I was confused because
Within a
I
city
didn't.
meeting, right? The workshop was scheduled within the public meeting.
We had a public hearing first.
Public hearing was first.
And then we had
closed
a
that.
workshop.
Then it was tabled.
And on that workshop, there were two issues. There was
was the
flock and there was
officers'
the business license ordinance.
Also, I'll note, we have had a workshop every single month since this council has been in session. We've had a workshop in May, June, July, every single month. We've had either a workshop, a special meeting, or a hearing, or one of those things. Now, sometimes we haven't had all the time that we've wanted to, and there's been some scheduling conflicts, but
Right.
I would disagree with the workshop. We've had special sessions, but not really workshops. We did a lot about the building across the street. We did a lot of meetings about that, but they weren't necessarily like workshops like this.
yeah.
Sure,
I
but to
mean,
my point though, if I may, we had a workshop about flock.
Yes, we did.
We went back to city council meeting and in front of everyone else, we stopped mid-sentence and decided another workshop was necessary.
But wasn't this helpful?
But I would like to say about
Sure.
that when we talked about having a workshop, we talked about having a representative come back and speaking to us, and that never happened.
Yeah, I don't recall that being the case. I thought flock was 7, actually. That's why I will,
I was just depending on Captain Sanders.
Captain
First time
Sanders said
and
that
the
she would have
second.
someone come back, the original woman that represented Flock, to speak with us, that the person that spoke with us was not all that.
That person wasn't as good as the district.
That's what we were expecting.
well, we don't need to do it.
Okay, sure.
We
Point is-
resolved that if the majority thinks that a bill that's been presented at a regular meeting needs to go to workshop, we'll have a motion, we'll have a vote, the majority will rule. We've got a date scheduled for workshops if we think they're necessary. I don't think we have to beat it to death.
Okay,
I think we're in agreement.
Yeah.
All right.
Will that start, I mean, obviously not.
I don't think
Do we
we're gonna
wanna
have a meeting on
Let's
Thursday.
skip for December.
Yeah, skip, please.
Right,
Yeah,
let's
we
skip.
got
I won't be in town.
Well,
No, do we want to have a December workshop?
No, because that's December
No, that's-
22nd. It's like.
Right, I think we don't want to.
Yeah, I won't be in
Let's,
town.
so January is when we're going to start with the monthly workshop.
We said the fourth Thursday?
Right, because we're gonna be
I
in
wouldn't be here
Christmas.
if I-
Right, exactly,
Yes.
exactly. That's what-
So we've got a December 13 meeting, and then we'll go to our regular meeting in January and see where we're at.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So
I'm going to, I'm sorry,
The fourth Thursday of every month, can we say that?
yes,
Yeah.
at 5:30.
At 5:30?
No, that is gonna-
If it's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, we'll address that at every council meeting.
Gotcha.
We'll just say, is there a need for a workshop? We'll take a vote and take it from there. Now, I would like a motion to go into closed session to discuss a personnel matter.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilwoman Cleveland,
Was that on the agenda?
Councilman Saxonhammer,
I'm just hungry. I'm just going.
This won't
Councilman
take long.
Evans,
Okay, yes.
Councilwoman Smith, absent, Councilman Hong,
Yes?
Councilman Nelson,
Of course.
okay, Councilwoman Rosso,
Yes.
Councilwoman Campbell,
Yeah.
All right, let me lock the door so that we don't have any visitors.
Hey, I gotta get off of this, right?
I don't know.
I can stop recording.
Stop recording.
Are we gonna do this in here?
Well, can I, real quick, 'cause I there needs to be a vote on this today. Like, it's urgent, like, it's, you know.
It's important.
Are we going back there?
No.
No, we can stay here, it's fine.
People walking into our closed session meeting.
We're doing it right now.